everybody, it's Andrew, and I welcome you back to the Revisionist Almanac, the show that gets into the time machine, takes a deep dive into the past Academy Awards ceremonies, and determines what the voters that year got right, and more importantly, what they got wrong. We're going to roll back the clock nearly a decade to the year 2015, a year where Chris Rock was able to get up on the Academy Awards stage as a host, make fun of Jada and Will, and not get slapped. That's right, back to the good old days. I have two terrific guests here with me tonight, both of whom you'll recognize from this season already. Up first, he's the co-creator and one-third of the holy trinity of podcasting from 1001 by One, and co-host of another podcast with his wife Melissa, Below Freezing, that discusses really, really bad movies. Please give it up for Adam St. John. Adam, thanks so much for being back.
I'm glad to be back. Glad to go back to a time where I only had one child. So we're good. We're doing lovely.
And we'll see if we have the same chaotic energy as 1994, which was, we went way off the rails on that one. So we'll see if this one goes equally as off the rails for sure. And I have a feeling it might with you.
Well, yeah. I mean, I do tend to bring that kind of carnage to podcasting. But yes. Well, I might try to rein it in.
Okay, and my other guest is a renowned horror author and a frequent podcaster herself. It's the one, the only, V.P. Morris. V, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence.
Of course, I'm happy to be back, and I'm really excited to go over this. This will take me back to a time where I was both single and childless, so it's responsibilities.
Hopefully the prep was a little less painful than 1954, which was your previous appearance.
Yes,
a few months ago.
Yeah, I was alive for this, which was making it easy because I saw some of these in theaters, and I had to do less prep and less knowing who everybody is. Even though I love the 1950s for theater, it makes it easier when you live through.
Yes, I would agree. This was a less arduous process, at least from my standpoint. And I'll get to your feedback from you guys on your prep here in a moment. But as a reminder, the show looks back on past Academy Awards ceremonies with the luxury of hindsight to determine what should have won the Oscar for Best Picture, Best Director, and the 4 acting categories. Now, before we start things off, I hope you'll take some time to rate and review the channel on whatever podcast streaming platform you're listening on, as well as finding and following the show on every social media platform using the handle @RevAlmanac. Okay, 2015. So for those who aren't familiar, the Best Picture that year was Spotlight, the true story of journalists unearthing a cover-up in the Catholic Church. Now, before Adam, V, and I are going to take a deep dive into the categories, we're going to take a moment and speak to the year we're covering as a whole. This is always a really good spot to kind of get some early hot takes in, turn the temperature of the room up a little bit. So without spoiling too much coming later on, I want to get your overall assessment of prep for 2015. Adam, let's start with you. How did you find 2015 as a whole, diving deep into it?
I think if I take it as a year, I divide it into two different sections, at least for me. On one half, there are really neat genre films that I thought were spectacular. There's a lot of high intense, possibly squirm-worthy movies in here. And I don't necessarily mean horror, but just like very intense, both physically and psychologically, movies in this batch that I really enjoy. And some of them will end up making categories as we go on. And then we have the sort of the Oscar batch. And, you know, you recently covered 2014, which is a year that I really do highly regard. I think there are a lot of stone cold classics in that year. And rewatching some of the Best Picture nominees and some of the other the nominees up for other awards in the categories that we're going to cover, there is a lot of, I mean, a term that, you know, comes with some shudders of its own, the term Oscar bait. There was a lot of Oscar baity stuff. And I will stay spoiler free, but there are two movies that will be talked about that I think are incredibly overrated and on the verge of being like offensive to audiences. And I don't mean like morally offensive, but I mean like give us some fucking credit. We're allowed to make jumps and leaps on our own. We don't have to be spoon-fed everything.
I can't wait to hear what those two movies are, and I'm sure you'll talk about them aplenty going forward. V, how about you? How did you take prep as a whole this time?
So overall, it's a really strong year for movies. I actually think that the mid-2010s in general is a really strong year, and I think a lot of current trends that we've gotten used to came out in this time. So it's actually kind of cool to reflect on stuff that we're kind of taking for granted. Like a lot of A24 stuff is almost kind of mocked a little bit these days when it was very much groundbreaking and new 10 years ago. So I liked getting that little window into the past and seeing how strong this time period was. But I do notice a common theme, not necessarily, I guess, not a theme, just there's a lot of, I guess, sausage fest movies where there's just tons of dudes, just so many dudes. It made making my female picks very difficult because, and they're good. It's not saying, no, it's bad. It has to always pass the Bechdel test or something. I enjoyed a good portion of them, like The Big Short, you know, and it's true to life. These are real people, so you can't, like, make it not what happened. But I just, like, kept writing down this long list of male actors that I loved, but it was really hard finding a lot of women because it's like there's like 4 leading males for every 1 actress in some of these, and like something like Revenant, there was like no women doing anything whatsoever until maybe the very end. So it was a little bit difficult finding the best actresses.
Yeah, it's funny. You on 1954, you covered a lot of sweaty ass cheeks with Seven Samurai, famously, and here we are with a whole sausage party for 2015.
Yep.
So yeah, it finds you somehow. I will definitely second what Adam said, where this year really reminded me of 2014 a lot, which again I just did prep for a couple months ago. I mentioned during the 2014 episode that it felt like that was a very deep year in all genres. Everything was kind of firing on all cylinders. 2015 was kind of right in that pocket for me where it felt equally as deep. I will agree that there are a lot of the prestige films from this year that I don't think hold up as well as some of the things that I will be nominating. Again, I won't spoil a ton of it right now, but I will also agree with Adam that I think there are some nominated films that are real shit. There's just some shit movies this year, and I'm going to jump right into some shit movies. So for the entire batch of prep that you both did, why don't you highlight maybe 1 or 2 movies that you found were the worst, most painful points during prep? V, let's go to you first. Is there a movie or 2 that you just really hated having to go back and revisit?
Oh yeah, the Walk. I mean, my God, that was painful. I feel like the French should be offended. Like it was bad. Like it was not like it was
Have you
really.
seen the documentary?
I haven't seen the real life documentary.
Okay.
I watched a few like YouTube like comparison clips to get a vibe of who they're going for, and I feel like they're trying their best, but I feel like sometimes you should maybe not be as true to life. Maybe they could have taken more artistic liberties to make it a bit more of an entertaining and less kind of hokey film. There's one that I didn't rewatch because I watched it back then and I did not like it. It's The Visit, M. Night Shyamalan's Visit, because at the time I worked for a mental health agency, basically a place that helps people who have schizophrenic type disorders, but they are well enough that they can function in society. And it was just very offensive to see basically schizophrenia being blamed for the evilness of that movie. And I felt like we had moved back, or I thought we had moved on at 2015 from that like stereotype of like the crazed killer. But no, and I was like kind of upset that they kind of pulled up their crazy as a trope. But I didn't rewatch it because I was like, no, I don't need to. One time was enough.
I did not go through The Visit this time for prep either, so I'll preface that as well. Adam, what about you? Is there a movie or 2 that you just did not want to go back to?
Well, I either picked movies from this year that I loved and that weren't nominated, or that were nominated to make sure that I could give like a decent opinion about it. I didn't go back and like The Visit's a great example. Like I didn't revisit it. I didn't feel like I needed to. The only movie, because I don't want to dig too deep into the well of films that I'm sure will come up later. The only one that really, really felt like a slog, like it took me 3 different viewings to get through it, was Bridge of Spies. I realize I'm a dad and that it's a dad movie, but like this is like a boomer dad movie. It was so slow. I was so bored. Gang, I was so bored watching Bridge of Spies. Like, give me something.
Is it like, where would you rank it on? Is it like Spielberg's most boring film? Would you put it in that class?
There are still a few of his I haven't seen, but yes, I think, outside of like West Side Story in the last 10 years, like he's going through a bit of a boring period, but a boring but praiseworthy period, I guess. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. Bridge of Spies might come up later for me, so I'll hold any Bridge of Spies context right now. I'll pick out two really quickly. The first one is hated rewatching Joy, the David O. Russell film with Jennifer Lawrence. I'm not a David O. Russell guy, personally, professionally. I don't really like his films. I respect Jennifer Lawrence, but I did not have fun going back to Joy, which was just a mess. And the one that I was so scared to go back and watch turned out to be the one that I had the least fun with. I think it's the most cringeworthy movie of the entire year, and you guys might talk about it here shortly. The Danish Girl. What the fuck was The Danish Girl? It was so hard to go back and watch Eddie Redmayne in that movie playing a trans character. It just, I don't know. I thought it really showed the evolution of how we've come in the last 10 years with trans representation in film and television and stuff, that I went back and watched this, and it was as painful as I thought it was going to be. And I just want to say, I know he's got an Oscar for The King's Speech, which we on this show have taken away from him. Tom Hooper is not a good director. He's done The Danish Girl, he's done Cats. For God's sakes, the man is not a good director, and it just blows me away that he's got an Oscar to his name. So yeah, I hated The Danish Girl entirely. I don't know if either of you want to talk to that movie or you want to save it or not.
I can save it or go now. It's really up to you. I have thoughts about Danish Girl and Joy. I'll save Danish Girl. The thing about Joy that I thought was interesting is that tonally, that movie is bananas. It almost makes no sense in terms of how they decide to tell the story. There's all that weird stuff at the beginning where like she ends up in the soap opera that her mother is watching. I didn't really get any of that. I was less offended by Jennifer Lawrence's performance this time around. That's what kept me going. But I thought this was a really interesting opportunity to do a biopic about somebody we don't know, and I felt like they flushed it down the toilet.
Yeah, because if I'm not mistaken, wasn't this piggybacking right off of the previous one with Jennifer Lawrence and Bradley Cooper? I'm drawing a blank on that movie.
Well,
there you go, yeah.
And in between, it was also American Hustle. So this was the third David O. Russell collaboration.
Yeah, it just felt like another push to get J-Law a nomination, and nothing more really. And structurally, that movie's all over the place, like you said. V, would you like to talk about The Danish Girl right now? You want to save it? I don't know if you have any opinions on it.
I could talk about Danish Girl or Joy. Spoiler, they're not showing up on my list, so it's not really going to mess with anything we're talking about. They were just kind of I didn't hate anything, but I didn't love anything. Joy, as you said, is tonally all over the place. It follows with like the grandmother narrating, but then the grandma dies and keeps narrating. And I was like, how is that even possible? It's you have to decide if the grandma's going to narrate or if it's just going to, like, it should just be told. I don't know why the grandmother was like not the selling point. Like, why was she the person holding the story together? It didn't really make a lot of sense. And there were times where J-Law was just acting beautiful and great. I was like, wow, this is great. But then like a scene later, everyone's awful. And it was just like, it was this the whole time. I just couldn't figure out if I liked it or not. And so I'm kind of like, there were scenes I really enjoyed, like when she finally sells it to the audience and makes all the money. Like, that's really exciting and invigorating, and you feel for her and her family. But there are other scenes where it kind of feels like a dress rehearsal, like no one's really giving it their all. And with The Danish Girl, I liked it. I mean, I like period pieces, but I really haven't seen a lot of newer ones. And it just felt a little slow. I mean, I can't really speak too much about, like how to feel about trans representation or not. So like, I'm not really going to comment on it because it's not my experience. And I think they did a decent job, but also Amber Heard was like terrible. Like, it was like a different level of actor. Like, they were pretty good. And then she was just kind of like, I don't know, like a C-level actress with other talented people, and it just kind of, every time she appeared, she just kind of threw all my attention went to her, but in a bad way. So I wish someone else had been. And now, not with the whole Johnny Depp thing, I don't really care. I just was surprised that she was actually not that good. And it was,
she's way out of place in that movie for sure.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, she seems like she's coming from a different perspective or a different movie, and it was just kind of like tonally kind of slow and sad, which I get is what they're going for, but it wasn't like super captivating.
Now, Adam, you kind of put your hand up like, I don't think The Danish Girl is going to show up for you much more in this episode. If that's the case, would you like to get your piece out about it now?
Oh, sure. But really, you two have said everything I was going to say. Really, just reemphasizing Tom Hooper I mean, just kind of continuing to dig from the well in terms of style and look and what he's trying to do. And also kind of about what V said. Like, this isn't my story to comment on in terms of it being about sort of a trans story. Again, though, I thought this was a really interesting character and a really interesting story that I think could have been done better by somebody else. And I don't know who that person is, but I with you, I had a problem with Eddie Redmayne's performance in it. And I don't know how you walk that. I don't know how you do that, but it was also very slow. And I guess what I'm saying, like everything's been said. So I'm like, yep, if we can check off the Danish Girl now, great. Cause I don't ever want to watch that movie again.
Good. That was my prevailing takeaway from it is I'm thankful I will never have to put that movie on and have my eyeballs stare at it again, because it's not happening for the rest of my life. I'm never going down the Danish Girl route again. Okay, well, before we get into the categories, it is worth mentioning if Adam, V, and I agree with what actually won the Oscar for any of the six. If we agree with any of the six, we're going to skip the online voting process, and they will get automatic entry into the Almanac. So we're going to list off what was nominated and what won in each category. We're going to wipe the slate clean, and then we're all going to make our own nominations and our own winner selections. And I have a feeling, based on Adam and V's previous appearances, I think there's going to be some strange, interesting, maybe off-the-radar picks. And I'm going to make a prediction now. This episode's going to have the most variety amongst the three of us of the season so far. And I'm looking at you, Adam, with 1994 and Oleana, because that came out of a whole different galaxy that I was not prepared for. So I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of range of opinion for this.
Good.
Yes, and that's the point of it. You know, really quickly, I'll get on a soapbox for a second and just say, I think one of the points of this show, hopefully for a listener, is we're doing the work every month to take these insane deep dives into God knows how many movies sometimes. And hopefully, by the end of this episode, we've curated a good selection of what we think is worth your time. And maybe you won't have to watch The Danish Girl, and you can just put that to the side, and you can get to a movie that one of us might actually like. So I think hopefully by the end of every episode, an audience member will be able to find a few movies that maybe they've never heard of or never thought about, like Oleana, and find their way into them, because I think there's a lot of really great stuff, and hopefully Adam, V, and I can guide you in the right direction. So let's get into Best Supporting Actress. We'll get right into the categories. So the actual nominees in 2015 were Rooney Mara for Carol, Jennifer Jason Leigh for The Hateful Eight, Rachel McAdams for Spotlight, Kate Winslet for Steve Jobs, and taking the gold statue was Alicia Vikander for her performance in The Danish Girl. Now, you're both familiar with the format, so Adam, we're just going to start with you. Your name begins alphabetically, so it makes it easy. Why don't you give us your nominees and your winner for Best Supporting Actress?
All right, let's do this. My nominees for Best Supporting Actress are Jennifer Jason Leigh for The Hateful Eight, Imogen Poots for Green Room, Felicia Rashad for Creed, Alicia Vikander for Ex Machina, and my winner is Kate Winslet for Steve Jobs.
Interesting. Okay, not where I thought you were going to go with that one. Why don't you tell us why Winslet gets the win of those five?
It is not, if anybody knows me at all from listening to anything that I've ever been on, I will tout my theatrical background. And I tend to lean towards story-driven movies over spectacle-driven movies. And I love an Aaron Sorkin script when he's not at the helm of the camera. Steve Jobs is exactly the kind of movie that I like, not only as a movie watcher, but as an actor. I thought Kate Winslet and Michael Fassbender had amazing chemistry. I loved their relationship, and I thought they played off each other really, really well. This was an interesting category to fill out. There are three that I truly, truly stand by of the five, and two that I'm like, I'm happy to give them the nomination. But it was Kate Winslet to me, probably by a country mile, I would say.
Who were the other two that were relatively in contention?
I really liked Alicia Vikander in Ex Machina, and I really liked Imogen Poots in Green Room. That's a real reactive type performance, but I also really dig that. But Kate Winslet was a really solid pick for me.
Now, what about Vikander winning for The Danish Girl? We've obviously all taken our shots at it. What did you think of her in The Danish Girl per se?
I felt like she was relegated to crying wife, which can work at times if there's more going on there. And again, I thought she was an interesting character, and I blame the screenplay and I blame the direction. I mean, maybe there's a better. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say she was bad. I just thought she was better and more. She was more captivating in Ex Machina to me.
All right. Well, Kate Winslet, Steve Jobs, love the pick. We'll come back around to you, Adam. Maybe a couple of people that just missed your nominations, but let's jump over to V now. V, why don't you give us your nominees and your winner?
Okay, so I'm starting in fifth place and going up. So Karen Pistorius for Slow West, Jessica Chastain for Crimson Peak, Aaliyah Shawkat for Green Room, Kate Blanchett for Carol, and Katie Dickey is the winner for The Witch.
Wow, another pick I was not expecting. Now, V, we talked offline before about our mutual love of The Witch, so I thought The Witch would potentially come up at some point. I didn't know if Katie Dickey was going to be the one, or Kate Dickey, pardon me. Why don't you tell me what was it about her performance in The Witch that led you to believe that she was the best supporting actress?
Well, actually, interestingly enough, when I first watched it the first time, because I saw this in 2015, it's one of my favorite movies, so I own it on DVD, so I've seen it like multiple rewatches. But when I first watched it, I was primed to think that maybe her character was the witch, and I kind of thought it was her story. And she's such a good actress that even though the story is supposed to be about her daughter and her husband takes a lot of screen time as well. I just found her so captivating, and I felt like she really embodied like a harsh puritanical woman from this time. And there's the scene where her and Anya Taylor-Joy are like wrestling each other to the death, and it's very terrifying for someone who's playing a mother. She goes from being warm to her children at times to being like outright cruel, and I just really thought she gave such an outstanding performance that I think the whole cast did a great job with the old timey dialogue, but I feel like she really just nailed that archetype of like this, woman who's very consumed by the culture she lives in and is quick to judge people.
And I'm curious, you have Kate Blanchett from Carol in the supporting actress category. Personally, I have her in lead actress. I'm wondering, was there a reason why you put her in supporting versus lead? Did you feel Mara was the lead, or were they both supporting?
I felt like, so from a writing standpoint, I've been trying to divide up the categories by who has the most character growth or who has a defined character arc. I don't feel like Carol, the character, really grows that much as a person, where Teresa does, and you'll see as we go along with the other ones with these kind of larger ensembles. I kind of put some people in leading that you might think are supporting or vice versa, just because they have a character arc, and I just don't feel like Carol really learned much or did. I mean, she went through a trying time with her husband taking her daughter, but I don't think she changed as a person, where Teresa was changed. And the same with the rest, like Jessica Chastain's character Crimson Peak doesn't grow. I mean, Aaliyah Shawkat's character gets killed, so there's no personal growth happening there. And Karen Pistorius, she's kind of almost like the MacGuffin of the prize at the end. I mean, she has her own character, thankfully, and in the flashbacks you see a lot more of her personality come out, but she's not growing or changing. She's just surviving. So that's what a lot of the supporting actors have, that quality of they were good, they gave a lot of personality, but their character didn't grow much.
Totally makes sense. Well, let me jump over to mine really quickly, and then we'll go around again, talk about some others that maybe just missed the nominations. So my 5 for supporting actress 2015, and I'm going to do these in alphabetical order by the film. So first nominee for me is going to be Rooney Mara and Carol. Don't have any issue with whether she's in lead or supporting for UV. I kind of had a hard time deciding who was the lead, who was the supporting. I just went with Kate in the lead and Rooney in the supporting. I've got Alicia Vikander for Ex Machina, not the Danish Girl. I've got Jennifer Jason Leigh for The Hateful Eight. I've got Rachel McAdams for Spotlight. And I've got Kate Winslet for Steve Jobs. So all in all, I think the Academy did a pretty good job with this, because I only have one deviation from what they actually nominated, and it's just Vikander in a different role than what they've got. I was kind of split 50-50 for me. There was really 2 that stood out, and it was Vikander in Ex Machina, and it was Jennifer Jason Leigh in The Hateful Eight. I think Jason Leigh does a shitload of work in The Hateful Eight to make that movie quite interesting since it's so male oriented, and I know she takes a lot of physical and emotional abuse through that movie, but I think she's terrific in there, and she's just wild and deranged, and I love it. But at the end of the day, I think Alicia Vikander just had a more substantial, complex role. I think her influence on the story was more impactful for me, and so for the first time, we're going to be putting somebody up against themselves in an online vote. So I'm curious to see what in the hell that's going to do when we get there, but I've got Alicia Vikander for Ex Machina as my best supporting actress. I'm not going to knock her for The Danish Girl. I think she's about the only redeeming part of The Danish Girl, because I think it's a mediocre movie and Eddie Redmayne's trying too hard and it's not directed well and it's written terribly. But I like Vikander, so I've got Vikander with my win. Really quickly, I'll throw out a couple of on the bubbles. I had Rachel Weisz in The Lobster.
She was my 6.
She was my 6. She was in the mix. I wanted to put her through. And then Kate Dickie was my 7th for The Witch. I really wanted to try to get her into the mix. I just couldn't. I liked my 5 really strong group. Adam, what about you? Anyone else outside of Rachel Weisz that was maybe in the conversation?
My 7 was Rooney Mara for Carol. And enjoy the performances in that movie. The more that I examine his films, I'm becoming less and less of a Todd Haynes fan. So I'm trying. I'm taking the patch, to get my Todd Haynes love up. But not such a huge fan overall of his movies. He's got a great aesthetic. They look good, but yeah.
I feel like May December just completely derailed the train for you.
It really did. It blew up the train is what it did.
Well, fortunately, you won't have to worry about a new film anytime soon because Joaquin Phoenix backed out at the last damn minute, so you're safe for a while. V, anybody that was just kind of on the bubble that you wanted to get in that you couldn't find room for the 5?
Yes, it's kind of an odd one, and it was on your list, and I had never heard of it. It is Mickey O'Hagan from Tangerine. She plays the, I guess, crack prostitute in that, who gets dragged around the city, but she does a very good performance, and that movie was great, but also like upsetting. So I wanted to give it more, and upsetting in like a difficult way, because I like horror stuff, so like upsetting is my jam, but it was like a different type of upsetting, I guess. So it makes a lot of almosts for me. I really thought she did a good job, and I haven't seen Florida Project yet, but it's on my list now.
Ooh, I think you'll like Florida Project.
Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah, I'm a Sean Baker advocate all the way through. Dying to see Honora this year. Tangerine's unbelievable in terms of I'm not going to mention it a ton, unfortunately. It fell a little below the radar for some of my categories. But the fact that he made the entire movie on an iPhone is mind-blowing to me. The technical craft that Sean Baker did with that. And it's weird because we're talking about The Danish Girl and whether or not it is good trans representation or whatnot. And Tangerine's in the same year, and it does like a substantially better job of telling a trans story through a trans lens. And it's just, I'm happy to hear that you gave that movie some love, because I unfortunately couldn't really work it into too many spots. But big fan of Sean Baker, big fan of Tangerine. I'll be eager to hear, V, what you think of the Florida Project whenever you get around to it, because it's equally as impressive, in my opinion, in terms of he just has this ability to tell really grounded stories that never feel like they're films. It kind of feels like he's a documentarian in a large degree, even with an actor like Willem Dafoe in the mix. It always feels so real, so raw, honest. I don't know if you've seen Red Rocket a couple of years ago. It's another great Sean Baker movie. But,
No, I've added a bunch of his stuff to my list after seeing this, so I have like a Sean Baker list to knock off, because I really liked his style, and it's very unique. You don't see a lot of it where it's like the Oscar bait stuff that we've kind of knocked a little bit. And we've seen 100 Joys, we've seen 100 Spotlights, even if they're good movies. The vibe is the same like throughout the last few decades, but there's nothing like Tangerine.
That's true. Yeah, it's going to be weird in 2024 when we get to 2025 to see if the early buzz right now on Honora, his latest film, is that he's going to be in the mix for Best Picture, Best Director. He came really strong out of the Cannes Film Festival. But his movies don't feel like, quote unquote, like big enough or prestige enough. So I'm going to be fascinated if this is the year he breaks through, because I think it'd be a really cool story to see a director who's kind of been like scrapping his way through these little independent projects. So yeah, keep an eye on Sean Baker this year. See what he does with Honora. All right. Well, this is going to be an interesting category when we get to the social media vote, because we've got 4 different options, though we only have 3 different actresses to choose from. So the listeners will be able to go with the Academy, who has Alicia Vikander for the Danish Girl. They can go with Adam's pick. He's got Kate Winslet in Steve Jobs. I've got Alicia Vikander in Ex Machina. And V's got Kate Dickie in The Witch. So I'll be curious to see where the audience goes. This will be coming out in October around spooky season. So Kate Dickie might get some really extra love for V there for the Witch. We'll see. The Witch is a divisive film, so I don't know. We'll find out. But I'm eager to see where it goes for sure. Okay, well, let's jump over to the Best Supporting Actor category now. So the gentlemen nominated in this category were Christian Bale for The Big Short, Sylvester Stallone for Creed, Tom Hardy for The Revenant, Mark Ruffalo for Spotlight, and winning that year was Mark Rylance for Bridge of Spies. So Cinema Pursuit Podcast over on Instagram sent us a question tied directly to this category. So they asked, what are your thoughts on the Best Supporting Actor category? We talk about it constantly that there's so many great performances that weren't even nominated. Things like Benicio del Toro in Sicario, Michael Stolberg and Daniels for Steve Jobs, Idris Elba for Beasts of No Nation, etc. Let's find out if any of those names are going to show up in our nominations. V, we're going to turn it over to you this time to start us off. So why don't you give us your 5 gentlemen and your winner?
The winner is going to be somewhat surprising. So we'll see.
I'd expect nothing less from you, V.
Yes. So starting in 5th place, Michael Fassbender for Slow West, Patrick Stewart for Green Room, Steve Carell for Big Short, Nicholas Hoult for Mad Max, and my winner is Adam Driver in The Force Awakens.
Whoa, that's a big shocker.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. I'm loving the boldness of the pick. Why does Driver in The Force Awakens do so much for you?
Well, because he's such a dark horse, because before this, pretty much no one knew who he was outside, unless you were a Girls fan, which I was not. So he, being a relatively no-name actor, or, on the lower end, delivering, in my opinion, a performance that carries most of the film. No offense, Daisy Ridley, she's I don't know why she was picked for that. I don't know why she was picked for that. She's boring, and every time it was just her, I was bored. And when Adam Driver's on stage, I am scared. Like, I am scared. This person, he's more unhinged than Darth Vader. He is just destroying things around the ship. There's the funny moment where the 2 stormtroopers turn around when they hear him like losing his shit over Daisy Ridley or Rey running, being able to escape. When she can mind read him back, and he looks genuinely terrified and also like a bit violated that she can read his thoughts. I don't think a lot of actors can pull that off, like unhinged and somewhat vulnerable / violated at the same time. And I just, I know the plot gets a little weird with the following too, but I wanted to know what was coming next for his character as a whole, full to the light side. It's kind of weird to have a character being tempted by goodness, because it's usually the other way around, hence The Witch. And there were other parts that I liked, but a lot of it was nostalgia bait. Like, I really don't think the other legacy actors were like acting their heart out. They were part of the franchise. They were there. They did a good job, but I just feel like he could just really nailed it.
Yeah, you could definitely make the case pretty easily that the only real redeeming thing about that entire trilogy as a whole is Adam Driver's, character arc to a large degree, because it's so messy. The director changes, all the stuff that happened behind the scenes. Those movies don't feel at all cohesive in any way, except for kind of the Adam Driver arc. So love the boldness of the pick there, V. Really quickly, you don't have Mark Rylance in your 5. Was he close? What do you think about Mark Rylance in Bridge of Spies?
I actually didn't. This one I didn't watch because so there was a few from your mega list. I cut just a few that I was like, I know I'm gonna not like it, and I'm just gonna not. And given Adam's reaction to it, I feel like if it's a boomer dad movie, then I'm not gonna like it, because my dad forced me to watch too much The Hunt for Red October. So like anything that's in that vibe, I swear it was on like every week in the 90s / early 2000s. I don't know, but it's like I'm not a big like spy, that just whole thing is not my jam. And I just I did a Wikipedia skim, and I was like, oh yeah, this is gonna be the few that I cut from this for time. So I can't comment. I'm sorry.
I would say it's relatively safe to assume if you watch Bridge of Spies, I don't think he's going to get into that 5 that you listed. Yeah, I think you made probably the wise decision there for yourself. Adam, we're going to go to me next, actually. So we'll save you for the end. So my 5 nominees for supporting actor are, I've got Oscar Isaac for Ex Machina. I think that he's a tweener, but he's more of a support for me, whereas Domhnall Gleeson, I think, would be the lead in that film. So I felt comfortable putting Isaac in supporting. I've got Walton Goggins, who is my man for The Hateful Eight. I love Walton Goggins in absolutely everything. I think he's ridiculously good in The Hateful Eight. He makes that movie for me quite a bit. I've got Tom Hardy for The Revenant, who I think does a really great job in The Revenant. I know that movie takes a lot of shit from people online at this point, and I'm sure it's going to be talked about much more, but I think Tom Hardy's really, really good in that movie. I've got Benicio del Toro for Sicario, who I think is so... It's the perfect encapsulation of, I think, what Benicio is. He's this dark, mysterious figure in a lot of films, and Sicario really captures that in this great way. And then my 5th and final pick is going to go to Mark Ruffalo in Spotlight. And honestly, if I just kind of like flipped a coin for any of those 5 guys, I would have no problem giving the win to any of them. I think they all are worthy winners. But the pick I'm going to go to is, I think, the one that elevated the movie the most with his presence, kind of like I did in supporting actress. And I'm going to go Mark Ruffalo in Spotlight. I think that Spotlight, I don't think it's as great as some people might think it is, and I don't want to tip my hand too much, but I think that Mark Ruffalo is the most important piece of that film, and I think he has several scenes that I think push the emotional narrative of that movie in a large way. And I know Mark Ruffalo's got some haters, some of us might know personally, but I think that those people, even people who dislike Mark Ruffalo, I think they have to kind of give it up a little bit for what he does in Spotlight, which I think is a pretty strong performance. So I'm not saying like he's the runaway winner for me. Again, if you tomorrow you might catch me and I might say Benicio del Toro, or the next day I might say Oscar Isaac. I don't know. But right now I feel like Mark Ruffalo deserves some flowers a little bit for what he does in Spotlight. So I'm going to give him the win. And I'll also say about Mark Rylance, is there an actor that gives more strange performances just in general? Like, I mean, I'm thinking like Don't Look Up. He's weird as hell as this like, I don't know what the hell he's doing in that movie. I have no idea what the hell he's doing in Bridge of Spies. He's not in it that much comparatively. And the accent's quirky as hell. And I don't know. I don't get Mark Rylance in this movie. I don't understand how it's even a nomination, let alone a win. It's a weird fucking win for me. And I'm not on the Mark Rylance train. I'm not on what he's doing there. So, Adam, if you want to try to give him any love, maybe you can, because he's getting nothing from me.
So I will give him love in the realm of the stage. Mark Rylance is a trained and well-established theater actor. I think he has a couple of Tonys.
Okay.
In fact, there was one year within the last 6 or 7 years where I think it was somewhere in London, and it came to the US. He did 2 Shakespeare shows in rep. He did Richard III and he did Twelfth Night. And in Richard III, he played Richard III. And in Twelfth Night, he played, I believe it was Olivia, because they did it with all men, as would have been the practice at the time of Shakespearean theater in the Elizabethan era. And if you see him play both of those roles, like, he is a well-trained, highly sophisticated actor. And for whatever reason, when he gets on screen, it's fucking weird. It is just odd choices in really conventional films. And V, you mentioned the spying part of it. I wish there was more spying in The Bridge of Spies. There's hardly any fucking spying in that movie.
What's the bridge made out of?
Stone, not spies. Some lies maybe, but not spies. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So he's good.
I should give Rylance a shot with some of his stage productions.
Yes, that would be my suggestion to you, yes.
Okay, because I can't make heads or tails of what he's doing with his filmography over his career, because like Ready Player One, again, he's this weird-ass character. Just everything he does on the screen is odd and a little bit off-kilter, and I don't get it. So, okay, Adam, over to you. Who do you got nominated and winning in supporting actor?
Okay, so my nominees are Benicio del Toro from Sicario, Walton Goggins from The Hateful Eight, Oscar Isaac for Ex Machina, Sylvester Stallone for Creed, and my winner, Richard Kind as Bing Bong from Inside Out.
That's glorious. Oh my gosh, that's so if I'm not mistaken, that's the first animated um, voice actor performance that's been given a winner spot this season. So love the representation there, Adam. I think we talked about it a little bit on the 94 episode with Lion King specifically, how I think voice animation just doesn't get enough recognition by and large. So why don't you prop that up a little bit and talk about why this voice performance was so special?
I mean, the thing about Richard Kind is that he's got such a recognizable voice. When you see him or hear him in anything, it's always a little bit of a treat, whether like it's his small weird role in A Serious Man, or if I haven't watched this in a while, but his voice performance in Big Mouth on Netflix, like he's got such a recognizable voice. But I also think he kind of gets pigeonholed into a kind of character. Kind of the highly irate guy is sort of what he falls into. This character is actually so pivotal in the movie, and it's small. He comes in and he's gone almost just as fast, but he's so recognizable. My kids got me a Bing Bong plushie for a Father's Day one year because they know how much I enjoy that character, and I just think he brings such a fun, dynamic energy to the movie. I think his voice was meant for animation. Like it's highly characteristic, it's highly recognizable, and I think he gives even more detail and richness to a movie that I think is already brimming with it. So that's why I'm going with Richard Kind.
I love it. That's wonderful to hear. So as I'm looking at the list, you and I have 4 of 5 similarities there. Was there anyone who, if let's say you didn't give it to Kind, who's number 2 for you? Who's close?
I think my closest was Benicio in Sicario.
Yeah, he's so good in Sicario. It's kind of phenomenal what he's doing in that movie with the darkness, and then really a lot of what happens is you don't know what's going on with Benicio's character underlying until there's that reveal later in the film where another character kind of gives the backstory on Benicio's family and everything, and that kind of unlocks everything for me where it's like, oh shit, okay, of course this guy's going off the deep end the way he is. I could sing Benicio's praise all day and everything he does. Love that. Who was just close that almost got into your top 5? Who was like 6 or 7 for you, Adam?
I think my 6 was one that kind of V mentioned in passing, and it was Jeff Daniels and Steve Jobs.
V, what about you? Anyone that was just on the cut line for you?
Well, basically all the other dudes in Spotlight, or not Spotlight, I'm sorry, Big Short. Like, it was so hard to pick from, as I've discussed with this problem, is because there's so many characters and none of them are really the main character, and you can kind of make the argument that none are, or they all are in some regards. So, I mean, I would throw in Gosling or Brad Pitt as well, because I think they did a good job, but they're not there that much. I think Steve Carell was like there for more of it, and also had a stronger like emotional tie-in to shorting the market. So that's why he's there and those two aren't, which like I love everyone in The Big Short. I think they all did a great job, but it was difficult to pick. I didn't want the whole thing to just be the Big Short, Big Short, Big.
Yeah, that movie really, all the actors, like you said, they kind of cannibalize each other in terms of they're all carrying like kind of an equal piece of the pie where it doesn't feel like anyone's got sort of a main stake in things. So it was hard for me to kind of separate them as I'm like power ranking who gave the best performance, because I think they all do a really good job, but I couldn't single one out. I'll throw out a couple that I just want to mention really quickly. I think Idris Elba in Beasts of No Nation is really, really great. If anyone's gotten around to that movie, he plays this kind of this military leader, if you will, and I think he's really intimidating in that film. It was a different role than I've seen Idris do. And also, there's this amazing movie. I don't think I'm going to get to it too much tonight, unfortunately, but it's called The Gift. And Joel Edgerton both directed it and star. He's one of the stars of it, and I love Joel Edgerton. I think he's one of those great underrated actors that just has this really strong body of work, and yet nobody ever talks about him. And he's creepy as hell in The Gift. And to know he's also pulling off the directing of that movie, I just want to give him a shout out, because it was an impressive job by Joel Edgerton in that movie. Because I go back to that movie every couple of years because I just like the dynamic of it, and Jason Bateman's really great in it, and Rebecca Hall. So definitely want to give Joel Edgerton a shout out there. Adam, you seem like you were into that movie.
Oh yeah, any kind of thriller procedural, like I'll give it a shot, and either it's going to pass my personal test or it won't. And I totally dig The Gift. That's a fun movie to get into.
For sure. It's not quite Oscar quality for me, but it's one of those fun movies that I just have a good time with. V, did you get around to The Gift at all?
Yes, I loved it. So I actually watched it on a train ride into Manhattan at like 10 in the morning. And it was just like a weird town to be like surrounded by a bunch of people on like that Tuesday going into the city. And I'm just watching this and I'm just like looking up, especially when it gets to the ending scene. I'm just like looking up at other people being like, what did I just watch? What's happening? What like and then I have to like go into Grand Central and like pretend like I'm a person and be like, how do I move my hands? How do I walk? And pretend like I didn't just watch this like horrifying ending.
Yeah, Adam, you're just coming off an episode of your 1001 show where you all gave sort of movies that you can't really recommend to people for various aspects, which is a great episode. I hope people go and check it out to begin with. But also, this is one of those movies, like V said, the ending is really psychologically damaging. It's not going to like shock you with gore or anything, but the idea that gets planted at the end of that movie is really fucking disturbing, and it's one that you can't just recommend to any old person. Like you got to know the right audience if you're going to send them down the path of The Gift, because it could ruin your day for sure, I would say, depending on who you are. All right, well, we've got, again, 4 different options when we get to social media for this category. So a lot of range of a lot of variety in this. This is going to be a fascinating category for the vote. So the audience can go with V's pick, who had Adam Driver in Star Wars The Force Awakens. They can go with my pick. I've got Mark Ruffalo in Spotlight. They can go with Adam's pick. He's got Richard Kind in Inside Out as Bing Bong. Or they can go with the Academy, who has Mark Rylance in that weird-ass Bridge of Spies performance. All right, let's get over to Best Actress now. So the 2015 nominees that year were Saoirse Ronan in Brooklyn, Cate Blanchett in Carol, Charlotte Rampling in 45 Years, Jennifer Lawrence in Joy, and the winner of the Academy Award was Brie Larson for her work in Room. This time, I'm going to start things off. So let's get into my 5 nominees for Best Actress. I also have Cate Blanchett in Carol. I think Cate Blanchett's one of the great actresses of all time. One of the great actors, let me preface that. Male, female, it doesn't matter. Cate Blanchett's in the all-time echelon. I love what she does in Carol. I think it's an understated performance. I think she's terrific in it. My next pick's going to go to Charlotte Rampling in 45 Years. Another film I'm incredibly high on. I always recommend it to people when you got to know the right audience again, but there are people I always recommend 45 Years to. My third nominee is going to go to Charlize Theron in Mad Max Fury Road. Sure, the movie's called Mad Max, but it's really a Furiosa film. She's the star vehicle of that performance. It's just unbelievable what she does in that movie. Fourth nominee is going to go to Emily Blunt in Sicario. And my fifth is going to go to Anya Taylor-Joy in The Witch. So this is another category, just like the one we just did. If I gave it to any of the 5, I have no problem with any of them winning. I think they're all equally deserving of the win. It did come down to a 3-person race, though. So it came down to Cate Blanchett, Charlotte Rampling, and Emily Blunt. I think Blanchett is she's the personification of grace and beauty when I think of an actor. And I'm proud to say she's already won in 1998 for the film Elizabeth, which, again, she's terrific in that one. I think Charlotte Rampling is remarkable. I think she gives a masterclass in subtlety in 45 Years. That movie is so devastating in what it does, but it's so subtle, it's so quiet. At the end of the day, though, I think Emily Blunt gives so much to what she does in Sicario. I think there's a lot of layers to that movie. It's on her face, it's on her body language. She gets put through the ringer in Sicario, and it just happened to be my favorite performance of that year. And so she's going to get my win. So Emily Blunt in Sicario is my best actress for 2015. And Adam, let's go over to you now. Who do you have nominated and winning?
Sounds good. So here are my nominees. I have Emily Blunt in Sicario. I have Leia Costa for Victoria. I have Brie Larson for Room. I have Amy Poehler for Inside Out. And I also have Saoirse Ronan for Brooklyn. And this will be the only time this evening that I side with the Academy, and I'm giving my win to Brie Larson.
Let me first ask you a question. In 2015, were you on the side of Brie Larson as the best actress? Has your opinion evolved over 10 years during prep? I'm just kind of curious.
Now, are you asking specifically to the group of nominees that we have?
Yeah, like let's say 10 years ago, put yourself in your shoes. Were you kind of in support of what she did then, and you've kind of steadfastly been that way, or has your opinion evolved at all?
No, it's always pretty much been that I dig this performance. I think it is an incredibly hard movie to watch. I've only seen it twice, the first time and for this. Both times I was an emotional wreck. And I know that it's manipulative in its way, but it's the story, so it's hard to say that it's intentionally manipulative because it's about what it's about. I think so much gets put on the first half of the movie, but watching her try to cope with her sense of freedom and how she's going to go about the world, I'm pretty impressed with a lot from the movie, and I think her performance is truly a standout.
The main reason I wanted to ask you is I was kind of taking a shot at myself because I used to be on the camp 10 years ago where I thought it was a bad Oscars win personally. I just thought it was, again, I thought it was kind of a manipulative performance and it was over the top, maybe to a degree or whatever. On this rewatch, this is kind of why I love going back and taking these deep dives, is because I can get a whole new perspective on things after not touching something for 10 years. I love Brie Larson in this movie. She was my number 6. I felt terrible leaving her out of my 5. But I came around big time on Room and big time on Brie Larson in the movie. So, again, I just wanted to kind of see if you had evolved your stance because I had done a complete 180 on what I thought versus where I landed now. And again, that's just the fun of doing this every month is I discover all these things that I didn't appreciate in the past. So, V, what about you? Who do you have nominated and winning?
So I have a few, and when I get there, I'll clarify why I think why they are not supporting actresses, why they are best actresses. Starting in 5th place, Imogen Poots for Green Room, Saoirse Ronan for Brooklyn, Charlize Theron for Mad Max, Anya Taylor-Joy for The Witch, and winning is, did she say Alicia or is it Alasia? I can't pronounce her name right.
I've seen
Ex Machina.
Alicia.
Thank you. Yes, I want to call her Alicia, but I've heard her say it a different way. But anyway, I'll just say Alicia, 5-hander, because that is her story. The whole movie is she's calling the shots the whole time. She's manipulating the men, and even though we may not see her first thing, they're all there for her. And she has growth arc as much as a robot can grow. I mean, that's a whole philosophical argument. But she basically escapes from captivity by using emotional manipulation. And I think she kind of grows the most out of... There's only really 3 characters. The 2 men don't really grow as a person, really. And with Imogen Poots, she is, a neo-Nazi skinhead who actually turns on her gang. Like, even though she may not, be fully free from that way of thinking at the end, she realizes what they're willing to do for their beliefs or how they can turn on each other when her friend Emily is stabbed, and realizes that they're not the good guy and she actually is, fighting for these other people who are not part of her gang or ideology to survive. And I think she has the most, terrifying and also I get a hint of sadness at times. It's like she's very clearly upset that her friend died, and she takes the most action out of all of the people trapped in the green room at first. She's making decisions while the rest of them are spinning wheels, and once again, she may not be the first group that we meet. I think she kind of ends up dominating the survival of this group.
Yeah, for sure. So I noticed you don't have Brie Larson in your 5.
She's my 6th, and Rebecca Hall for The Gift is my 7th.
Okay.
It is an upsetting and moving movie and performance. I think it's her best role. I don't really like much of what she's done since then, but maybe it's because I've only watched it one time, but I kind of feel like maybe the original thing that you were saying, that it did feel like sometimes a little over the top. I don't know how to describe it, but there was times where I felt like it was just a little much. And on top of it, the other women on this list did a really good job. I feel like if just one of them wasn't here, one of those movies got released a few months later, she would have made it up into one of these spots.
Yeah, and so both of you have Saoirse Ronan also in your five. She was just outside of my mix. She was kind of in like the 7-8 range. I'm a big Saoirse Ronan fan. I think she's terrific. Do either of you want to just kind of talk to what she does in Brooklyn, which I think is really good and kind of underappreciated 10 years on? I don't feel like people talk about that movie or that role very often. V, what'd you think of her in Brooklyn?
So I loved it. I really think that there needs to be more movies made like this that are they're wholesome but also compelling. Because like sometimes if you go down too wholesome, you get Hallmark, and that's just bad. And I feel like there's been a turn in the last 10-15 years to make things overly edgy, overly dark. I mean, we had a lot of dark and upsetting films spiking out this year, and I like that this is that it's light, that the stakes are important to the character. Who's she going to marry? Where is she going to live? But they're not like, a neo-Nazi game trying to kill you, or the financial crisis of 2005, or having to survive inside of a dead horse. So like I just wish that there was a bit more. And also her performance is great. Like she's very sweet and very much learning the ropes of being an American. It's very endearing, and I wish that there was just a bit more like endearing films that exist in the world.
Yeah, it does feel like there's the potential for it to get some sort of renaissance over the next, I don't know, 6 to 8 months, because she's going to be a real player from the looks of it for the best actress in this year's Oscars race, and maybe people will kind of go back and revisit the Saoirse Ronan backlog a little bit. So it might be discovered down the road. Adam, how did you take Brooklyn as a film?
Oh, I pretty much what V said. It's a very wholesome film, and again, it's a reactive performance. She's having to go across the ocean and start a new life. She misses her family intensely, and and when you talk about growth, like the whole film is about growth, right? Who she was before she moved and who she is when the time comes. And the choices are they're so pivotal, and they're so relatable. You know what I mean? Like who am I going to marry and where am I going to live? Like these are things that we can think about, right? These are things that like I could think about right now and they make sense, versus some of these more extreme cases. And yes, those are also captivating, and the performance that Brie Larson gives in Room is wildly different than the performance that Saoirse Ronan gives in Brooklyn, but they're both very reactive, and they both are having to make active choices as they go through. I really loved it. I thought she was great.
Yeah, I think by and large, as I kind of looked through this category, I think there is the Oscars. It often feels like go for the more flashy, more defined roles, but it felt like there were multiple performances this year, be it Blanchett and Carol, Rampling in 45 Years, Ronan in Brooklyn. There were a number of them that I thought gave these really good, understated, quiet, subtle performances that I just think need more appreciation by the Academy voters, because just because you're doing something over the top doesn't necessarily mean you're giving the best acting. And I feel like there's sometimes a disconnect between what voters see and what maybe audiences see, because I just thought there was a lot of really good, calm, quiet acting that had a lot of depth underneath.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is best acting and most acting.
Correct. Yes. It feels like oftentimes they're giving the most performance versus the best. And that's again a big part of the whole idea of this project, this podcast, is, reassessing things and saying, okay, sure, it was flashy in the moment, but there were all these other things that have lived on because of the emotional weight of things. And so, yeah, I think this was a really good Best Actress category. It wasn't like 30 deep, unfortunately, because as V mentioned earlier, 2015 was very male dominated in a lot of the ensemble films. But I think I've got 16 Best Actress nominees sort of in my mix, and I think most of them were really good. Even like Olivia Cooke and Mia and Earl and the Dying Girl, I thought was really good. Mia Wasikowska and Crimson Peak. I thought there was a lot of good stuff this year, so I was really happy with the Best Actress mix that we got to talk about. All right, well, again, you guys are groundbreakers on this episode, because this will be the first time an actress and a role will have the potential to win in 2 categories in the same year. So we'll see how far Vikander can go with Ex Machina. So again, the options for Best Actress, you're going to have 3 this time. You can go with my pick. I've got Emily Blunt in Sicario. You can go with V, who has Alicia Vikander in Ex Machina. or you can side with both Adam and the Academy, who have Brie Larson in Room. All right, let's jump over to Best Actor, which I think is going to be a fascinating category based on Leo and the Revenant and that whole thing. So let's get into Best Actor now. So the nominees for 2015 were Eddie Redmayne in The Danish Girl, Matt Damon in The Martian, Michael Fassbender in Steve Jobs, Bryan Cranston in Trumbo, and winning, of course, though controversially looked back on now as a bad Oscars win, is Leonardo DiCaprio in The Revenant. So, Adam, we're going to go over to you first on this one. Who do you have in Best Actor?
All right, my nominees are, I have Matt Damon in The Martian. I have Colin Farrell in The Lobster. I have Michael Fassbender in Steve Jobs. Samuel L. Jackson in The Hateful Eight. And Logan Marshall Green in The Invitation. And my winner, because just love everything he does, is Michael Fassbender in Steve Jobs is my winner for Best Actor.
You swerved on me. I thought you were going to throw your bad motherfucker line out again and drop a Sam Jackson on us.
Yes. No, not quite. Not quite.
So, I mean, let's talk Fassbender. Let's talk Steve Jobs for a second. Obviously, Fassbender bears very little resemblance to what Steve Jobs physically looks like. Maybe that's a knock on some people in a quote-unquote biopic. Did you have any problem with the visual aspect of the lack of similarity? What was it about Fassbender that was so good that it transformed, the similarities didn't matter to you?
The look similarity, I honestly could give one. I couldn't give one shit about. I think it's the way that he handles Sorkin's language, and it's funny because it's both a big performance. It's very showy the way that he has a bunch of text. I mean, he gets to have great. I mean, it's scene after scene after scene of lovely conversations, whether he's riffing off of Kate Winslet or Seth Rogen or Michael Stuhlbarg or Jeff Daniels, and you can see the dynamics between each of them. And even though it's not huge, he does have a character arc. I love the last moment with his daughter that he's finally kind of giving some recognition to at the end of the film. Now, again, I also don't, this is from Aaron Sorkin, who fictionalized Facebook. I don't really care how true all of this stuff is with Steve Jobs. He creates a compelling story with these 3 product launches. I love everything that Fassbender does in this film. It's a stage-worthy performance. It's really good. That's why I'm going with Michael Fassbender.
Yeah, I feel like if somebody wants to watch a Steve Jobs movie that's maybe more true to life, if you will, and has somebody that kind of looks like him, you can go with that Ashton Kutcher version, which is not worthy of your time, in my opinion. But I'm kind of with you. I don't think that it doesn't bother me that he doesn't necessarily look like Jobs, because I think he embodies him in a really interesting way. Really quickly, you don't have Leo in your 5.
I sure don't.
Where do you stand on Leo and his infamous Revenant performance?
You mean the one-note performance where he just runs around a lot and grunts? Yeah, I think it's a pretty fucking stupid performance. There are 2 movies that were very prominent this year. This is one of them. I think The Revenant is so close. It's beautiful garbage. I think it's gorgeous bullshit is what I think it is.
So I remember on Twitter when the day you went to watch the movie, you kind of posted about it, and you kind of created a firestorm amongst some people for sure about, there are some opinions on The Revenant, both positive and negative, but is your overwhelming takeaway The Revenant is just not good? Like, you think it's an actively bad movie?
I think the best cinematography win is worthy for sure. I think was that Lubeski?
I believe so, yeah.
I think I would never discredit the way it looks. But the story is really broad and ham-fisted. I think I don't really feel like there are arcs. And I realize that on-screen acting is doing, but I thought the screenplay was actually pretty bad. There are so many overt lines, like, let me just tell you what this is about. We can't trust you, audience, so we're just going to tell you what this is about. This is a big pass for me.
This is kind of an off-the-cuff question, and I'm not giving you any prep time for it, but would you even say it's a top 10 Leo performance?
Maybe just to be on this side of it, I would say no.
Okay. All right. I expected some bold Leo takes, so we'll see if things continue that way. So V, you're up to bat now on Best Actor. Why don't you give us your nominees and your winners?
Okay. So at the bottom, we've got Jason Bateman for The Gift. Number 4, Tom Hiddleston for Crimson Peak. Michael B. Jordan for Creed. Michael Keaton for Spotlight. And my winner is Christian Bale for The Big Short.
Okay, so you were able to separate somebody in The Big Short amongst the rest.
Yes.
Was Christian Bale just that much better than everything
Yes,
else?
because he creates such a unique character who is a real person in real life who does have high functioning autism, and I think he's able to capture that experience without being like hokey or potentially making fun of it in kind of like a Sheldon Cooper way. And he is very weird, but it's a very small detail. And I had to go back and watch clips from other Christian Bale films, but he does this thing where when he talks, the top of his lip covers his teeth. Like it's always kind of a little bit stuck. But in other roles, it's not doing that. So he made that like a particular character trait. And I can't move my body that way. I can't move, like, I don't have that much control over my face to, like, have different facial tics for different characters. And I was just, like, impressed that he actually, like, he's so detail-oriented that he had, like, a little change in the way he held his lips against his teeth when he talked. And no one actually does have a character arc in The Big Short, really, because everyone that we care about is right. They all are thinking that there's something wrong with the way we do mortgages, and it turns out they're all right. No one learns anything really except that they were right, and there's some emotional, I think Steve Carell has the most emotional problems with that because his brother killed himself because of a similar situation, and he has to like tell the young people like don't celebrate just because we are right. We shouldn't we shouldn't be right. But Brad Pitt hates the system, doesn't trust it. He continues hating the system and not trusting it. Steve Carell hates the system and doesn't trust it, continues hating and Christian Bale thinks he's, correct, and turns out he is correct. Like, no one is like, oh, my life has been changed. Like, my way of thinking about the world has really been changed, except maybe the two young, like, new stockbrokers. So it was really hard picking, like, a true main character, but I feel like he does a good job of, like, making himself into this very unique person.
All right, V. Are you going to side with Adam on the Leo DiCaprio conversation? How did you find The Revenant?
He does a lot of grunt eye acting. I mean, if there was a category just for grunt eye acting, then he would win. He would win. If that was a separate thing, then I don't know anyone else who can eye act better, grunt act better. But nothing else really happens. Like, obviously things happen, but he doesn't do anything else. Like, he has very few lines, and you're right, it is pretty garbage. I do think it's pretty garbage. I like survival horror, so I kind of thought that I would like the aspects of him fighting against the wilderness, but I really didn't, because it couldn't make up its mind if it was survival horror or revenge or actually like a hint of romance about his wife who had passed away. And I think they kind of fridge her and the son. Like, I know that this is a true story. I didn't look up the exact details. So this person exists, and I believe he had a Native American wife who was killed. So like, I can't obviously undo history, but I kind of didn't like that she existed only as a kind of like this celestial figure guiding him. Like, I understand that at this time, most fur trappers were going to be men. I'm not mad about that, but I just kind of didn't like that, like, I don't know, being guided by a spirit of a dead wife, but just felt a little passe. And yeah, he got injured so quickly in the film. I thought that the whole bear attack happened like at the halfway point. It happens like in the first 15 minutes, and then he's just on a stretcher eyeing Tom Hardy angrily. So I mean, yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, him and the bear were almost making, like, the same noises. And, like, it was, yeah. So if there's a category for just, like, angrily looking at Tom Hardy and the eyebrows kid from We're the Millers, then he wins. But no, this is not his best performance. I don't think I would have to look at everything he's ever done. It's either not on the top 10 or it's, like, number 10.
Okay. All right. So 2 for 2 on the DiCaprio bashing. So we'll jump over to me, and we'll see where we go from here. So my nominees for Best Actor in 2015 are Tom Hardy for Mad Max Fury Road. And let me say, I know Tom Hardy has almost no dialogue in that movie, but I think that's almost like a silent movie level quality performance with what he does physically. And so if anyone's going to scoff at me because Tom Hardy doesn't say a whole lot in Mad Max Fury Road, I think that movie's more than just dialogue to a large degree. And so I think Hardy deserves a little bit of recognition for what he does with body language and stuff in that movie. Next up is going to be Matt Damon for The Martian. He's like 90% of that movie, and I think he's really good in The Martian, personally. My third nominee is going to go to Leonardo DiCaprio in The Revenant. I don't think it's one of his top, I don't know, I'm going to cut it off at like top 5. I don't think it's a top 5 DiCaprio performance, but I actually do think he deserves a little more credit than just the grunting bear man, or whatever the case may be. Now, obviously, when it came to like him eating raw fish and all the shit he was doing just to win an Oscar, it was like, okay, chill out, man. We know you really want this Oscar, but you don't have to do this kind of stuff. But I actually do think on this revisit, it was the first time I'd gone back to this movie in 10 years. At the time, I was very anti DiCaprio winning for this, and kind of like Brie Larson, I found myself a little more intrigued in what he did. So I felt he's my number 3 nominee. My 4th nominee is going to go to probably the most off-the-board pick of what we've got so far, and that's Geza Rohrig for Son of Saul. Don't know if either of you got to Son of Saul. It won Best International Feature in that particular year. I think Geza Rohrig does a really remarkable job in that movie. And then my 5th and final nomination is going to go to Michael Fassbender in Steve Jobs, who I adore Michael Fassbender. I've been on the Fassbender train dating all the way back to Steve McQueen's Hunger in I think like 2008 or whenever that was. Coming into prep, I was 99% certain that Fassbender was going to be my pick because I've always loved what he does in Steve Jobs. I think it's just about the best Aaron Sorkin dialogue of all of his films, and I know that's a pretty high bar, but I do think it's one of the better Sorkin scripts, and I think Fassbender just carries that movie. However, I think one actor rose above the rest, and I think it's the only performance of the 5 that I nominated that the entire film like caves if this performance isn't there. And it comes from somebody who's not even an actor. The guy's primarily a poet, and this was his first role of his career, which makes what he does on screen even more transformative to me, and that is Geza Rohrig in Son of Saul. I'm aware that I'm going to get like maybe 1% of the online vote because nobody's seen Son of Saul. I respect the fact that that's the case, but I'm hoping by me giving him a nomination, somebody's going to go out there and check out this movie, because it's basically about a person who's imprisoned in a concentration camp, and I'm not going to reveal a bunch of the details of the movie because I think people should check it out. But in a lot of ways, this movie worked for me the ways The Zone of Interest worked for me, in that I found it a really powerful, compelling, different approach to World War II and to the concentration camp experience that we've seen before in Life is Beautiful and Schindler's List and all these other movies over the years. So Geza Rohrig it took my breath away. I could not believe what he was doing with that movie, and the fact that it was his first real acting performance, I don't know. It left me speechless. I can't say enough superlatives about Rohrig in that movie. And so I hope one person that's listening to this goes and checks out Son of Saul, because I think it's a worthy movie of your time, a very deserving winner of Best International Foreign Language Film that year. So Geza Rohrig is my pick. All right, well, let's get over to some close but no cigars. Just missed out. I'll throw out a couple really quickly. Adam, I'm so happy that you got him into your 5. Sam Jackson doesn't get enough lead performances over his career. He's just always been one of the great supporting actors, and it's cool to see Tarantino give him like prominent billing in this spot. And I love Sam Jackson. Wanted to get him into my 5. And the other one that I just love what he does in the movie. It's O'Shea Jackson Jr., who's the son of Ice Cube, who plays his father in Straight Outta Compton. He looks just like his dad, and he becomes his father. Like if you know anything about Ice Cube and you've seen him personally, professionally, like O'Shea Jackson becomes his father in a way that's just mind-blowing to me. So I really wanted to try to find a way to get O'Shea in there. I just couldn't. My 5 was really strong. So those are a couple I'll throw out. Adam, what about you? Anybody that you want to give some love to?
Creed, I guess Michael B. Jordan is my 6. But I got to tell you, I actually found this not a deep pool. I had my 5 And I was like, I'm glad I got them, because if I had to dig much deeper, it would have been given Bryan Cranston an homage for Trumbo, which is a movie that's fine and a performance that's fine. But I'm like, I don't want to nominate that. So no, I'm good. I'm good with mine.
So your 5 is very locked in for sure.
Yes.
Okay. What about you, V? Anybody that was close but just missed the cut?
So Ralph, either Einstein or Ensign, I'm not sure how he pronounces it, but he's the father in The Witch. I thought he was really good, but I don't think, yeah, obviously not as good as the other guys. And then also, like, Grunting brothers, Tom Hardy from Mad Max and Leo from The Revenant. I didn't, like, I liked Tom Hardy in Mad Max, but I felt like Charlize Theron just took so much attention that I almost, like, I didn't even think of him when it came to time to make the list. And like, yeah, like, I feel like Leo did the best he could do with what he was given. And the first thing I actually thought when I watched this movie and also learning about all the horrible things he did to prepare for it was like, oh, this is his Illuminati humiliation ritual. Okay, this is his test for that. He's one of them, obviously. Not fully serious that I think the Illuminati's in charge, but if it is in charge, this was his like personal sacrifice to get in good defense.
You've just made the algorithm like get all the conspiracy theory nuts over to this podcast, so thanks for that, V.
Yeah, so you're well found. If you want some very interesting people to watch your stuff now.
I will quickly say, though, I think Leo went, like I said, he went way too far into like trying to win this Oscar. Everyone knew it at the time he was pushing for it. Going back and watching his acceptance speech, I was impressed with his acceptance speech, given the obvious pressure on everyone was waiting to see what he was going to say, and it was well done. It was tactful. It wasn't like too drawn out, and he devoted a lot of the time in that acceptance speech to climate change, which is something he's been a big proponent of over his career. And so I'm appreciative that at least when Leo got that moment to get on stage and finally win his lifetime achievement Oscar, for lack of a better term, he at least used it for the right cause, if you will. So that was nice and refreshing to see going back this particular time and looking at it. All right, so we've got 4 nominees, and based on what I'm looking at, there's a high likelihood that Leo's gonna win the online vote potentially, just based on maybe name recognition. We'll find out, because the 4 options you're gonna have are: you can go with Adam, who has Michael Fassbender and Steve Jobs. You can go with V, who's got Christian Bale in The Big Short. You can go with my pick, which is Geza Rohrig in Son of Saul, or you can of course side with the Academy, who has Leonardo DiCaprio in The Revenant. And really quickly, before we get to director and picture, we're going to take a little detour and give out the 2 honorary awards we give out every episode. But I'd like to preface this by saying I think this gimmick has, reached the end of the line. And this is the last time I'm going to give out these 2 honorary awards. And you'll find out why when we get to the Grace Kelly Award, because we are truly scraping the bottom of the barrel at this point, and this got to be a gimmick that I just get tired of, quite frankly. So let's start with the good, the John C. Reilly Award, and this is going to go, again, to an actor who maybe didn't have the single best performance, but he was in multiple things that I thought were worthy of recognition. There were solid options. You could, of course, go with Oscar Isaac, Tom Hardy, Michael Fassbender, Sam Jackson. They were all in multiple films in 2015. I felt they were all too big for the award. So I could have gone with Domhnall Gleeson, who was in 3 films that year. I could have gone with Michael Stuhlbarg, who's very much that guy who just always pops up and stuff, and you're like, oh shit, he's great in everything. But my pick is going to go to a living legend of the big screen, even though he's never once been nominated for any of his roles at the Academy Awards. He was in The Hateful Eight. He was in Bone Tomahawk. And he was even quite fun in Furious 7. Kurt Russell, for me, is the definition of a person deserving of an award like this, because Kurt Russell is a movie icon. There's no 2 ways around it, and yet the critics have never shown him even a little hint of respect over his career, which is crazy, because Kurt Russell just has multiple films that are iconic and will live with us forever. And so I wanted to give Kurt Russell a moment to say thank you for being awesome. I've loved Kurt Russell since I was a kid, watching movies I probably shouldn't have been watching as a kid, like The Thing and Escape from New York and all that stuff. So either of you want to talk about Kurt Russell really quickly? Love him, hate him? Where do you stand on him?
Oh, Kurt Russell's he's great. I mean, The Thing, Escape from New York. He's also in kind of fun they're not bad, but like I love the movie Breakdown. I think that's such a fun, witty thriller from like 1997. And he's like, yeah, he's absolutely iconic. Good choice. I was actually thinking you were going to go with Domhnall Gleeson, but I think that this is a better choice.
I was close, but I feel like Gleeson might win or might be nominated for an Oscar at some point in his career, which still feels like it has multiple decades left. I feel like Kurt Russell's probably missed the boat on that, and so wanted to give him some love. V, where do you stand on Kurt Russell?
I like him. I especially like the earlier '80s stuff. I think they're always a lot of fun. The Thing is one of my favorite movies of all time, so he definitely deserved recognition. So good choice.
All right, well, let's get to the bad now. The very, 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 very bad. So, quite frankly, there was almost nobody I could even scour to pick through because Alicia Vikander was in 3 prominent roles, but she has an Oscar in real life. Jessica Chastain has 2 films this year. She also has an Oscar. So, quite honestly, there was one woman that I could find with multiple films, and I feel safe saying she's never going to even be in a conversation over what could be another 40 years of her film career at this rate. And she was in Black Mass with Johnny Depp. She was in 50 Shades of Grey. I'm talking about Madam Web herself, Dakota Johnson.
Wow.
When I have to get to Dakota Johnson to give an award to, that's the death nail in the coffin for this category. So thank you, Dakota Johnson, because you have completely buried this category once and for all. Though I will quickly say, even though I'm not a Dakota Johnson fan, I've seen almost nothing she's in where she's good in it. But I watched a movie about a month ago, and it came out in the last year, and it's called Daddy-O. It's not a particularly great movie, but it's her. It's Sean Penn. She's in a taxi cab. They have a conversation basically for the entire 90 minutes of the movie, and she was decent in it. And that's the most praise I can give Dakota Johnson, is that she was decent in one movie I've seen. And so there we are, the end of the Grace Kelly and John C. Reilly Honorary Awards. Thank you, Dakota Johnson. All right, well, let's get over to the Best Director category now. So the 5 gentlemen for Best Director that year were Adam McKay for The Big Short, George Miller for Mad Max Fury Road, Lenny Abrahamson for Room, Tom McCarthy for Spotlight, and the winner that year was Alejandro Iñárritu for The Revenant. Now, this was a notable win for Iñárritu because he became just the 3rd director to win the category in consecutive years. The other 2 were John Ford in 1940 and 1941, and then Joseph L. Mankiewicz in 1949 and 1950. So something that had not been done in a long, long time. V, we're going to start with you on this category. So who do you have nominated for director, and who do you have winning?
Okay, starting at place number 5, have Adam McKay for Big Short, Ryan Coogler for Creed, Jeremy Saulnier for Green Room, Robert Eggers for The Witch, and my winner is Del Toro for Crimson Peak.
Wow, okay, so Crimson Peak kind of came off the board out of nowhere there. Finally, we haven't had you've had a little bit of Crimson Peak love, but
because this movie is all about style, and you wouldn't have that style unless you had Del Toro. If you had a much more plain Jane director, it would just be mid. But it's one of the better gothic tales told, and it's not, reinventing the wheel when it comes to gothic horror, because the tropes are very limiting. So, it's not, from a storytelling standpoint, it's not groundbreaking or really amazing, and I think the acting is good, but not the absolute best. But man, can he make something creepy and eerie, but also artful and beautiful at the same time? I had to give it to him. He's just so good.
I dig it. I mean, Del Toro's got an army of supporters that love everything he does, but then he's got an equal group of people, whether it be The Shape of Water. Some people are just not into that movie, Adam being one of them. Crimson Peak went way under the radar in 2015. I feel like it was a big box office flop, but I feel like it's kind of taken about 10 years for the cycle to move a little bit, because I see it being mentioned more and more frequently over the years. Were you always into Crimson Peak? Like, did you see it in 2015, B?
I didn't see it right when it came out, but I saw it within like a year or two of it being released on streaming. And I really enjoyed it. I've watched it every few years since then. I love Tom Hiddleston. I think he did a really good job. Jessica Chastain and Mia they're all very good. And it's actually, there's actually some twists you don't see completely coming. So, and also like the fact that the whole house is like sinking, it's on red clay, like it's very visually appealing, and you get this sort of sense of foreboding to it that I think it's just so masterfully done.
As a horror author yourself, I feel like it's right up your alley for
Yes.
that. It's like in the sweet spot for you for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So how close was Robert Eggers to catching Del Toro? Was he serious consideration?
Well, originally when we picked this year, that was my first thought was The Witch was going to win for like pretty much everything. And I had forgotten that Crimson Peak was 2015 exactly because I knew it was like this time period, but I didn't know the exact year. And then when I looked it up and made my list, I was like, this is probably going to end up winning for Best Director. And yeah, that you can't beat Del Toro, I think, with some of this stuff, especially when he stays in his gothic wheelhouse.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that one. I'm huge into Del Toro. Pan's Labyrinth is my personal favorite, but I think he's got such an aesthetic to him, and he's so unique to himself that he's got a deserving win, in my opinion. Whether or not people like Shape of Water, I think he's a deserving Best Director winner over his career for something he's done. So happy to see Crimson Peak get some love there. Let's jump over to my nominees really quickly, and then we'll get to Adam to close us out in this category. So my 5 for the year are Alex Garland for Ex Machina. He's obviously most known for his writing prowess, but I think he's grown into his own as a director, and I think Ex Machina is a really good example of how he kind of hit the ground running and is kind of continued on, in my opinion. My second nominee is going to go to Quentin Tarantino for The Hateful Eight. I know that's like, we don't do screenplay on this particular show. We just don't have the time, quite frankly. I don't need this to be a 10-hour podcast project, but I kind of couple in director with screenplay writing if there's going to be somebody who does both facets. And because Tarantino is so intrinsically involved in every aspect of his film, I think what he does with The Hateful Eight is really masterful, in my opinion. It's got, nods to the thing and all of these westerns he loves, and so I love what he does here, and I feel like this is the movie he doesn't get enough recognition for his directing. Everyone points to Pulp Fiction and Inglourious Bastards and all those others, but I think The Hateful Eight is one of his best. Third nominee is going to go to George Miller for Mad Max Fury Road. Not a whole lot needs to be said, in my opinion, for what George Miller does with Fury Road and the way he brings that story to life. My fourth nominee is going to be Alejandro Iñárritu for The Revenant. Maybe it's the cinematography wowing me. I don't know. The cinematography is truly on another level. The way they shot that movie in entirely natural light, it's a real feat in terms of the way it looks. And maybe I'm giving Iñárritu too much credit for the cinematography work versus the acting, the screenplay, whatever the case may be. But I feel like Iñárritu's win wasn't that out of line, in my opinion. So I don't mind him in my 5. My fifth nominee is going to go to Denis Villeneuve for Sicario. Again, Adam, I'm gonna get people towards your podcast and that episode you guys just did, where you guys mentioned another Denis Villeneuve film, 2010's Incendies, or however people want to pronounce that. I really love what Denis did in that period of his career, where now he's obviously this bona fide sci-fi master, for lack of a better term. But it feels like he's kind of been pigeonholed, where the fans sort of expect him to do sci-fi and only sci-fi at this point. And if you look at his earlier career, even Arrival, which was like his first sci-fi project, but didn't feel necessarily the way the Dune does nowadays. I like this period of Denis' career, and I think Sicario's unbelievably well directed, in my opinion. But I don't think I'm going to surprise anybody with my pick. George Miller's Mad Max Fury Road is so special in terms of what he does directorially. I think the way he makes the action choreography come to life, the way he had this entire movie in his brain, and he basically, mapped it all out on storyboards and basically animated the movie on storyboard before he put it to life. It's unbelievable to me what Mad Max Fury Road is and how that vision can translate to the screen. Like, in anyone else's hands, that movie is not what it is today as this all-time great action film. And so I think George Miller probably should have won that year. He was obviously one of the nominees. It's one of those years where it's like, if the Oscars actually wanted to give action movies the love that they deserve, George Miller would have won in 2015, but they felt compelled to give it to the more prestige film or whatever with Iñárritu. But for me, George Miller, just unbelievable what he does. He's my winner. Adam, why don't you close us out for the category?
Okay, my nominees are I have Lenny Abrahamson for Room, Ryan Coogler for Creed, George Miller for Mad Max Fury Road, Ridley Scott for The Martian, and winning Denis Villeneuve for Sicario.
Awesome, awesome. Now, where do you stand on Denis' career, which is kind of a tale of two halves? Are you a fan of his more recent science fiction projects?
I prefer the early stuff.
Okay.
And I still have not seen Encendies, but Enemy, Prisoners, Sicario, like those three movies for totally different reasons are really captivating. And I think that he's got a good eye for interesting, odd characters and situations. He's not above doing a movie that's not going to give you all of the something like Sicario. You know, even when you know about like Benicio's past, there's still a lot left unsaid. There's a lot that we don't fully know, and that sense of mystery that he has. But I think he works really well with his actors. I think he gets great performances out of his actors, and he also, you know, I mean, unlike something like The Revenant, which I think fully relies on the DP, you've got something here where you've got director and DP working together. That scene where they're trying to come back across the border and they get stuck is just tension at its finest. I think it's just pivotal filmmaking, and he's great. He'll get his Oscar. It'll happen. I really hope it's not for Dune Part 2, but he'll get an Oscar someday.
It will inevitably be for Dune Part 3. He's
Great.
He's going to get he's getting the Peter Jackson treatment where they're like, we know Lord of the Rings is unbelievable, but we got to wait until you do your third one to give you your love. I guarantee you, I'll mark it right now. Villeneuve wins for Dune Part 3. It's the way the Oscars work. It's coming. Yeah, I love that pick. So Ridley Scott, let's talk about him for a minute.
Yeah.
The Martian. Now Ridley Scott as a director could get his own like 3-hour podcast because his career is just all over the damn place. I mean, literally all over the place. I personally don't think that it's one of his better directorial efforts. Where do you stand on it in totality of Ridley Scott's career? It doesn't feel like a Ridley Scott movie to me.
Well, see, I actually think that Ridley Scott is not one of those directors who can be his style can be recognizable just seeing it on the screen. I mean, I know he gets lumped in obviously to the Alien franchise because he's done 3 of them, but I don't, like Thelma and Louise does not feel like a Ridley Scott movie. In a real way, I don't think like All the Money in the World feels like a Ridley Scott movie. Yeah, then you've got like Your American Gangsters, Body of Lies, but yeah, they some do. And as far as where this kind of fits in the Ridley Scott pantheon, this is only one of a couple of his movies where I feel emotionally invested in the characters. I mean, Gladiator is up there, and Thelma and Louise, but I mean, outside of that, it's, characters are kind of put at a distance, or, it's not that I obviously care about what happened to them, but in terms of being like on the level with them, like whether or not you want to put it solely on the storytelling or Matt Damon's performance, I think you got to give a lot of credit to Ridley and how he shoots it. And the movie gets a lot of shit about like, well, why the hell was Kristen Wiig in this movie or Donald Glover and doing, the others, the Kate Mara spaceship, Jessica Chastain, all that stuff. But I actually think for it not being a quote Ridley Scott movie, I think that's what makes it. I like him dipping his toe in something that's a little out of his, like it's a popcorn flick, but not in the way that he usually makes them.
That makes sense. I mean, I think you're definitely right that it felt like he was on a certain trajectory in the 80s coming off of Blade Runner and Alien, and like it felt like there was a clear lane Ridley Scott was going, and it's certainly the last 25 years. It feels like he's kind of dipped his toes into different genres, and he's kind of a chameleon, and sometimes it works, and sometimes you get The Counselor, and it doesn't work, and
or House of Gucci.
The less said about House of Gucci, the better.
Fair.
I hate that. Yeah, I hate that movie. But Ridley Scott's, he's an interesting director. And so I was curious. I was hoping you could sway me a little on The Martian because I like The Martian, but it didn't feel like a Ridley Scott movie to me. So it was hard for me to kind of place him in there. But maybe you've talked me into bumping him up a little bit. So I appreciate that. Who was on the bubble for you? Somebody you maybe just wanted to get. Who was 6? Who was 7 for you, Adam?
Oh man, this director was tough. I really had a hard time with this. Just to give a little love to these movies because I do really like them. They're not necessarily ranked. I had Yorgos out there with The Lobster, and I also had Sebastian Schipper for Victoria.
Okay, so that's the perfect segue. Thank you for including one of those two people in there. I also had Yorgos for The Lobster at number 6. V, you've only kind of hinted to me about your lobster experience. I don't think you were as into Yorgos and The Lobster as maybe Adam and I were. What are your lobster thoughts?
I hate Yorgos and everything he stands for. Hate it so much. So before Favorite, I had seen nothing that he had done. I saw The Favorite, and I am mad. Like, I'm mad that happened. I don't like anything that the vibe, the weirdness. There has never been film that he's made that I enjoy. I think I like The Lobster even less. I haven't even tried anything else because I just don't like it. His thing. I don't know what it is. We're not simpatico. It's just I just don't like his vision.
Have you seen Poor Things from last year?
No. And at first I was interested, and then I saw more extended clips, and I was like, wait, I have a feeling. I was like, oh yeah, no, it's him. I'm gonna hate this. It's just, I don't know what it is, but it just rubbed me the wrong way. I don't like his style and the weirdness whatsoever.
And I think you had even mentioned to me at one point in one of our conversations that there's something about whether it's the dialogue or the delivery of actors reading his dialogue that maybe kind of bothers you in a way.
Yes, there's from The Favorite, there's a line about like Emma Stone talking about how if she's too poor, she's gonna like start selling her asshole on the street, and it just came out awful. And it's just like, humans don't talk like that. I mean, not that they don't speak vulgarly, but the way she delivered it, and like none of the dialogue feels like, it's like if you texted an alien about humanity and they were like, okay, I'm gonna make a movie about it. And that's what it feels like, AI generated movies. And it's just like there's something wrong. Like it's like uncanny valley. It's like they're imitating humanity, but it's not. And I understand that he's making social commentary. There's a lot of class commentary and commentary about the weight you put on finding romance and a partner in a society. So like that he's making social commentary, but I just don't like the execution.
I had never really thought about. I mean, he's on his own wavelength, and you're either on the Yorgos wavelength or you're not. But I had never really thought about him in like the context of an alien, and now I'm picturing the movie Men in Black when they're like looking at the big screen for all the humans who are aliens in disguise, and I guarantee you Yorgos Lanthimos is an alien in a human body because he just operates on a whole different level. I will be fascinated if you ever do get around to Poor Things. I feel like that might be the one that maybe connects with you more, because I agree with you, like the killing of a sacred deer comes to mind, where the dialogue is so stilted or stunted. It's weird, it's off-putting, it's just slightly different than like standard conventional dialogue that is intentional, but I can see it rubbing people the wrong way. But I feel like Poor Things maybe will get you a little more in line. So you'll have to let me know if you ever get around to that one.
Okay, but we'll see. I'll have to be in an interesting mood that day. We'll see.
Adam, are you on the Yorgos wavelength for people who don't know?
Maybe just to cause a point of contention intentionally on the podcast, I am as into Yorgos as I am not into Guillermo del Toro, would be probably the way that I would phrase it. I think Crimson Peak is not good. I think it is not a good movie. I'm pretty much underwhelmed by everything he's done outside of Pan's Labyrinth, and I think it's a lot of his conventionality that actually just bores me to tears. And then it's just style, and I'm like, well, if you're going to do style, then you've got to do something different. Which is why it's something like a Mad Max is like, I really could care less about the story in it, but I think the practicality of how it was filmed, I don't know. I gotta be honest, Del Toro feels very cheap to me anytime I watch it.
Have you seen The Devil's Backbone?
No, of course, it's one of those movies, like a lot that I own and just have not seen, but it's there. It's on the shelf.
I feel like that's one, kind of like where I told V maybe Poor Things will be one that she could get into for Yorgos. I feel like maybe The Devil's Backbone.
I really like Pan's Labyrinth. I think that's a standout.
And Devil's Backbone is much more in that vein of a Guillermo film, in my opinion. But yeah, what about you, V? Any directors that were just close for you?
Yeah, so as we talked about a little before, Sean Baker for Tangerine was one that was just missed the cut, and similar to sort of Best Actor and Best Actress, if like one person had been in a different year, this would have been on the list. And also, obviously, George Miller for Fury Road is I like it, but I just don't particularly love everything in that movie. And the other movies were just and directing, POV was just better and everything else, but those were very close runner-ups.
Yeah, to Adam's point, this category was really really strong. I mean, I could go 20 deep where I felt like any of those 20 could have maybe snuck into a 5 depending on how I felt that day. Though it's kind of funny because like Steven Spielberg for Bridge of Spies, he's one of the great directors of all time. He was near the bottom of my list. I think Bridge of Spies is not a well directed movie, and there are a couple others, but yeah, Danny Boyle I don't think gets enough credit for what he does with Steve Jobs. Like it's not always, you mentioned it, Adam. Sometimes Aaron Sorkin directs his own movie and it turns out like shit. And it's like it's not always easy to put Aaron Sorkin dialogue to film in the right manner. And I don't think Danny Boyle gets enough credit for Jobs the way he gets credit for Train Spotting or 127 Hours or some of the other Danny Boyle stuff, Slumdog, all that. So give him a shout out really quickly. And also, animated directors don't get really much credit, but I think Pete Docter for Inside Out deserves a little bit of love. Before we go to the next category, V did reach out to me, though, last night with a surprise question. I have no clue where we're going with this, but V, I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Okay, I'll ask it and then I'll answer it so you guys have time to think about it. So, which of your director nominations, and you could even include your backup, so like number 6 and 7, if you want to, would you want to direct the least favorite film or the toughest watch that you mentioned at the beginning of this?
Oh my God.
So I have 2 answers basically. One, I'd like Del Toro to direct The Walk and make it like creepy instead of coopy. Like, make it scary, because I'm afraid of heights. Like, I'm afraid of heights more than I am afraid of, like, monsters. So I would like to see him actually make it scary and leave all the surface kookiness somewhere else. Or I would like to see the Visit directed by him as well. Or, this is hard now. I'm changing everything that I've picked before. Or Sean Baker directs the Walk as well and make it extra weird. Like, or lean into the weird and make it, like, very, very kooky. It needs to be either kooky or scary, and it wasn't either.
That is a fascinating question. Adam, do you want to?
I think if I could get Denis Villeneuve in his Prisoners phase to do a gritty version of Bridge of Spies, I would be in. I'd be into that. Like where we have some fucking spies. Like that would be great. That would be amazing.
Yeah, because I mean, considering what he pulls off, like you said in Sicario, that whole crossing the border scene, just like tension ratcheted to the highest level. Him doing some sort of spy thriller would be really compelling film. V, I have honestly the Danish Girl. I can't even imagine anyone else doing the Danish Girl, so I'm like racking my brain. What the hell? Put Quentin Tarantino in the Danish Girl and let's see what comes out.
Oh my goodness! Let's live in an alternative universe.
And then I don't know. I mean, give Alejandro Iñárritu joy, and let's see what comes out of it. There you go.
What if it becomes another Bardo? Are you really going to stick through it? Oh God,
fucking Bardo! Oh my God, did either of you make it through all of Bardo? I did, painfully.
Yeah, I fucking watched that movie.
Okay, yeah, Bardo. I've blocked that from any part of my brain that like tracks movies. So yeah.
Sorry to bring that back up.
All right, well, V, thank you so much for bringing a surprise to the table. I always like little surprises like that. That was a fun one. So they're going to have 4 different options to vote for when we get to Best Director. Stacked category. I think any of these 4 could win, would be deserving winners. You've got V's option. She's got Guillermo del Toro for Crimson Peak. You've got my option. I've got George Miller for Mad Max Fury Road. You've got Adam's pick. He's got Denis Villeneuve for Sicario. Or you can go with the Academy, who had Alejandro Iñárritu for The Revenant. And now we're going to get over to the Best Picture, the big one, the one that most people really like to chomp their teeth into. So the 2015 Best Picture lineup was The Big Short, Bridge of Spies, Brooklyn, Mad Max Fury Road, The Martian, The Revenant, Room, and the top honors that year did go to Spotlight, as we mentioned before. Now I'm going to start off this final round, and then we'll get over to the two of you. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I painfully had to do it for 1942. If there's 10 spots available, I'm going to find 10 movies worthy of consideration. So I do have 10 nominees in my Best Picture lineup. So for 2015, here are my 10. First up, I have Carol. Second, I have Ex Machina. Third, I have Inside Out. Fourth, I have Mad Max Fury Road. Fifth, I have Sicario. Number 6, I have Son of Saul. Number 7, I have Spotlight. Number 8, I have The Hateful Eight. Number 9, I have The Revenant. And number 10, I have The Witch. I'm really, really proud of my 10. I think that's a cool, diverse lineup. There's a lot of genre stuff in there. There's animation, there's action, there's horror. I just think that's a really good... I liked my representation of my Best Picture lineup showing how diverse 2015 was and how strong it was. But at the end of the day, there was one movie in 2015 that I saw it 7 or 8 times in theaters that year. I was on the hype train for it in 2015. 10 years later, I've watched this movie more times than I can count. Probably in the, 24 times, maybe more. It's been a lot. I've watched this movie over and over and over. I think it's the single most impressive action film that's ever been conceived, created, and put on film. It's Mad Max Fury Road. I love this movie so much. I think it's such an unbelievable achievement from every single aspect, the technical departments, the acting departments, the direction. There's not a single point in Mad Max Fury Road that I would change, that I would think deserves improvement. I love this movie from start to finish. I'll never get bored of it. I think it's the greatest film of 2015, and it's going to get my pick. So, Adam, let's go over to you now. What's your Best Picture lineup and your winner?
Okay, I'm gonna save my winner for the last one that I read. So here we go. My nominees are: I have Ex Machina, The Invitation, The Lobster, Mad Max Fury Road, The Martian, Room, Sicario, Spotlight, Steve Jobs, and my winner is Inside Out.
Amazing pick there, Adam. I will preface this by saying Inside Out was my number 2 choice. I was very close to giving it the win, if not for the genius of Fury Road, in my opinion. I love Inside Out too. Why don't you sing Inside Out 2's praises as the Best Picture of 2015?
I think it's a movie that, it was one that I loved when it came out originally. It was one that I thought could actually crack into the nominations given the expanse of the nomination pool. I love that it got an original screenplay nomination. That's my favorite category. I totally support that. It's a movie that when I watch it, every time I give it a rewatch, and I'm not going to say I've watched it a bunch, but I've seen it 4 or 5 times. It just hits differently. It's not just, yes, broadly speaking, it's about a movie about, the relationship between parents and kids and your emotions. But because it is specifically a movie about a parent and daughters, this movie just, there's a personal tug that I get as a father of 2 daughters. And I love the creativity in the way in which they break down things that are highly complicated and things that we really can't fully ever understand because there's only so much that we can ever learn about our brains and our emotions. And so the way in which it is depicted, I think, is creatively fascinating. And I think all the voice work is great. You gave a little love to Pete Docter, and he deserves it too. I just think it's become the Pixar movie that I most commonly gravitate towards. And it's nothing against any of my favorites from when I was younger. I still love Toy Story. I still love Finding Nemo. But this one has just become, for me, the end-all, be-all about what Pixar can do. They can make movies that entertain kids for different reasons, but that also keep the parents interested. I love this movie.
I assume both of your daughters are into the movie themselves?
They are, and they're true younger kids because now they prefer Inside Out too. When I'm like, I tell them all the time, you're crazy because the first one's better. But I love that they have their strong opinions about it as well.
So really quickly, what were your opinions of Inside Out 2? Did you love it?
I didn't love it, but I certainly enjoyed it. I think personally, I think there's a pretty big gap, but also maybe it's because I just want to not accept the fact that my oldest is 10 going on 18. Maybe there's just a barrier that I haven't gotten over yet because it's going to be all too real very soon.
Totally fair. I've recently seen Inside Out 2 in the last couple of weeks, and I gave it like an 8 out of 10. And I do think there's a pretty big gulf between the two, but I think that's because I think the original Inside Out is a bona fide 10 out of 10. It's perfect. And so it was hard for me to like compare the second, but I think it's a pretty good Pixar sequel. It's one of their better sequels. I had a good time with it. V,
Yeah.
what about you? Where do you stand on the Best Picture lineup?
All right, so starting at the bottom, I've got Carol, Mad Max, Creed, Ex Machina, Spotlight, Brooklyn, The Big Short, Inside Out, Green Room, and the winner is The Witch. Shocking no one.
Again, I had a feeling maybe you had messaged me something yesterday on Instagram. I had posted like a recommend about a bunch of horror movies, and The Witch was one of them. And you're like, I think it's going to be a good day tomorrow. And I'm like, okay, I think it'll be a good day too. What is it about The Witch that puts it number one for you?
So I think it marks a turning point in horror. There could be a few that came a little bit earlier that it made 2010s or the mid 2010s onward have its unique voice or a unique separation in horror into almost a subgenre of this art house that came out, and it's also art house that is very detail oriented. It has a story, it has characters, it has a message. It is not just there to scare or titillate or freak you out. It's because I came of age during the like Saw / Paranormal Activity era of horror where there's no substance going on. It's just meant to scare you. And as much as I like that style, I was ready for something more, and this really made me love horror even more than I was. I was more of a casual fan, and I became much more of a serious fan when this movie and a few of the subsequent ones, like the Hereditaries and the Midsommers, came out. And I just think it's going to be looked back, or at least I hope it's going to be looked back as a bigger turning point in horror or in maybe even cinema than it gives it given credit for. Some people say it's boring and slow, and I think they're wrong. So
Now, I'm going to kind of go on a little tangent here. Where do you stand on Robert Eggers as a whole? So he's got The Witch, he's got The Lighthouse, he's got The Northman a couple of years ago, and he's about to have Nosferatu coming out this year. Do you like Eggers in totality?
So I did not love The Lighthouse, and I'm afraid what's happening to him is what happened to Jordan Peele, which I originally loved Get Out, but I hated Nope. And I feel like they have this thing where they make something that is truly unique and truly impactful in cinema or horror history, and then they let a little bit too much of their weirdness comes out. And I feel like The Lighthouse was just too weird. And same with Nope, it was just it's becoming too, I guess, maybe artful. I basically want more of the same, I mean, not identical, but something that is grounded in reality a bit more, where The Witch is feels, there is obviously real magic in this, but up until The Witch is revealed, it feels very realistic, naturalistic, that this could be a real family from this time period. And I don't feel that way about the two lighthouse keepers. I don't feel they kind of almost don't feel like real people all the way, and it's just sort of a weird thing. I have not seen Northman, but I do plan to see Nosferatu just because it looks really good and I like the entire stuff. So for the most part, I like him, but I'm hoping he just doesn't go too off from what he originally started with.
Adam, how about you on Robert Eggers as a whole? Do you like all three of his current films? Are you excited for Nosferatu?
I am excited for Nosferatu. My thoughts on The Lighthouse can be listened to on our episode of 1001 by One. And I actually replaced The Lighthouse with The Witch. That was my replacement for that episode. I think The Northman is not good. I mean, I think that. I mean, given V's analogy there, I think that might be his Nope. I think Northman is just like, it can't just be one thing. It's got to have a lot of extra shit that I just think is unnecessary. I was not a fan of The Northman, but I am excited for Nosferatu.
Yeah, when it comes to Eggers, I've said this before on other shows and other platforms or whatever. I feel like Robert Eggers and Ari Aster are sort of one in the same, and then their careers are on a direct parallel right now, where they both did two films that were pretty critically acclaimed, one being Aster did Hereditary and Midsommar, and then Eggers did The Witch and The Lighthouse. And then they each got a pretty substantial increase in the budget for their third film. The Northman, which is big and showy, and then Ari Aster did Beau is Afraid, which is also big and bloated and showy, and they both kind of like they sort of like flexed themselves as like kind of like V said, like, see how weird we are, see how different we are. See, I personally really like the Northman. I'm not a Beau is Afraid fan, but I know they both have their own sort of camp of people that are into them. I'm excited to see Eggers, I think, strip back his stuff a little bit with Nosferatu. I think it's going to be a little more subdued and more in the Witch era, so I'm excited to see what he does with Nosferatu. Great picks, V, all around. I was curious if Green Room was going to be your winner.
It was close.
I know you have great affection for Green Room, which is, again, another movie that I feel like over the last 10 years has sort of been discovered by people, and I feel people talk about it more. How close was it to you getting a win?
I was flipping it on my spreadsheet about every other week. It was kind of just like, never mind. And I'd watch a new movie and I was like putting consideration, but it was like The Witch and Green were always kind of fighting each other for the top place, because I just think they're both coming out in this, like kind of newer indie horror phase, and one is more fairy tale and one is more real life. But I love that movie. And actually, I'll throw in another question that's along the lines of Green Room. What's your desert island band?
Ooh.
Which all three of them have to, or the whole band is supposed to answer in that movie. I'm going with Red Hot Chili Peppers. Yeah, one band, but it could be their entire discography.
Okay.
So I'm going with Red Hot Chili Peppers because they've been around forever. I grew up listening to them, so there's a lot of nostalgia. I don't think I'd ever really get completely bored of them, so I'm going with them.
It's a good pick. My gut instinct is to say my favorite band of all time, which is the Beatles. I mean, that's kind of a cliche answer, but they also have, like, if I get all of their discography, I get a shitload of music and all sorts of different personality. But I'd probably go Radiohead. Just I don't know. I can vibe with Radiohead most of the time.
I'm going to go with the Beach Boys.
Perfect for a beach.
For no real reason other than if I'm on a desert island, let's play into the island aspect of it. Surfing safari, just as I'm out there. Surfing safari.
I like it.
I respect it for the vibes. Yeah.
I think it would drive me insane listening to the Beach Boys every day.
I'm sure it would too. Listen, I don't know how long I'm going to...
I don't
know how long I'm going to make it on this desert island. This could be a really not fun adventure for anyone.
You're going to end up like Paul Dano in Swiss Army Man, the end of a rope, just praying for a farting dead body to come upon you. Okay. What's that be?
Oh, they never specify in this interview, because obviously it's like a little joke, like how you would play it, because if you're on visual electricity, but I guess it's just sort of like so cute way of obviously asking who's your favorite, but it's like, do you have like an iPod with unlimited, or is there a vinyl? Like what's the situation? But I would go with that without. But one thing I love about that movie is as the danger heightens, each character like changes their desert island to like band to like something that's more like mainstream or embarrassing. So like they start off with saying, like like Black Flag or Nine Inch, something that's really, and then they're like Mariah Carey, Britney Spears, like towards the end. So like I like that as they actually got scared, their like persona drops, their true self comes out.
We all have those pretentious choices, and then when it gets down to the facts of it, we all have our like real, honest, guilty pleasures. That for sure. Okay, well let's talk about Spotlight for a second, because I would feel bad leaving Spotlight in a place where it doesn't get some discussion because it obviously won Best Picture. I'll quickly jump in. I'm going to go to V last because I think I'm most intrigued by V's response to Spotlight because she didn't nominate it, and Adam and I both did. I actually have a lot of respect for the movie. I'm always going to gravitate towards movies about journalism. I almost ended up, going down the road of journalism in college, and it's just a thing that's always near and dear to me. So I really like that aspect of the movie. I also have enough Catholic guilt built in from, years of Catholic school as a kid. So I guess maybe some of that's still embedded with me. But yeah, I think Spotlight's a good movie. I think it's a bad Best Picture winner because of what it went up against in 2015, both what it was nominated against and all these other movies that came out that year. So I think it's a bad win, but it's not a bad movie, if that makes sense. Adam, where do you stand on Spotlight?
I think it's a good movie, and based on my feelings about some of the other, I don't think it's a bad win. at all. I think the biggest thing to say is the conversation about Mad Max Fury Road, because I think that movie has gained a lot more traction over the last 10 years. Other than that, I don't really think there's anything. I mean, at the time, you could have said The Revenant, and I think, it was what's going to win, Revenant or Spotlight. But I really enjoy the movie for what it is. I also like the procedural, journalistic nature of the storytelling. But I look at the list of movies up for Best Picture, and a lot of them are like, no, I don't think so. But so yeah, I don't think it's a bad win. And I also enjoy the movie. I mean, of the movies on my 10, it was lower on that list, but I still really enjoy it for what it is.
And V, obviously, I posted something about movies that are hard to get through without falling asleep on one of my Instagram stories not too long ago, and you responded by specifically telling me Spotlight was the answer for you. So why don't you elaborate a little on how hard it was for you to get through this movie?
For some reason, this movie should have been named Ambien for me. I don't know what the problem is, and it's not that I'm obviously sympathetic to the victims, and like the story is obviously upsetting. And I saw it originally when it came out in theaters, and I obviously stayed away through that. But every time I would rewatch, and I had 3 attempts at rewatching, I was just out. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's that there's not a lot of music in it. There's not a lot of like artistic stuff. It's very matter of fact in its storytelling, which I appreciate, but maybe it's just because I'm watching it later in the day. I just kept falling asleep every single time I attempted to get through this, and I don't know what it is, but it's similar to The Big Short, and maybe I'm missing something. I don't feel like there is a ton of character growth from main characters. They're obviously fighting to uncover, so they have a conflict. But I think Michael Keaton, who I put in a nomination for, is the one who has the most growth and has to come to terms with not only his friend Jim being on the side of the church, but also the fact that like the city that he loved is not as like on the up and up as he thought it was. And he has, I think, a bit of like more of a crisis of, not of character, but a crisis of identity, and trying to come to terms with it. And I know that the rest of them do suffer emotionally from what they've learned, but I don't feel like they really became like different people, or that there was sort of like, oh, I'm going to live my life differently now. They're going to continue doing the same thing. They're going to continue doing journalism, and I'm glad that they did journalism. And there's some great moments like the 6% scene where they find him, but it's not 13 priests, it's closer to 100. Riveting and upsetting. So there's great moments in it. That the confrontation at the end between Michael Keaton's character and the lawyer for the church is good, but I don't know. I think it could just be that there's just not a lot of action happening. It's just a lot of talking that it would just put me to sleep each time. And I wanted to stay awake more often than it wasn't like I didn't want to see the whole thing.
I think we all have those, certainly Best Picture winners. There are probably some that stand out to all of us that are just hard to get through. Like The Last Emperor comes to mind. That's just one for me. Like, I can appreciate aspects of The Last Emperor, but it's fucking impossible for me to watch The Last Emperor and not fall asleep. Even if it's like 10 o'clock in the morning. Like, that movie just makes me tired intrinsically in my body. Adam, is there like a Best Picture winner that you're like, God damn, I can't watch this movie without wanting to fall asleep?
I feel like I'm going to get some ire for this one, but I would go with Return of the King.
Okay.
Because
not a Lord of the Rings guy?
No, and whether or not you're talking about the movie itself or the fact that it is part of a very long trilogy, it is, to me, it's just a slog. And then when you think the slog is over, we've got to slog through 5 endings, which is, I don't know. I'm a busy person. I've got stuff to do, but I can't.
Safe to assume you've never watched the extended versions.
No, safe to say I have.
Wow.
I've watched all of the extended versions because I like to punish myself for some reason. So no, I've seen all. What really gets painful is the Hobbit trilogy, because that's you want to talk about Ambien. That's like taking morphine for me.
Yeah, I'm on the side. Yeah, just because like the Hobbit as a book, for people who are like know their stuff, like the Hobbit as a book is so small, and the fact that they tried to extend it into a trilogy of films is crazy. Like if you had made the Hobbit maybe a 2.5 hour movie instead of 3 films. It would have been manageable. But yeah, The Hobbit's tough to get through for sure. And we will be, next season, I'll have 2 episodes where we'll be doing 2001 and 2003. So both Fellowship of the Rings and Return of the King will be in the conversation. So we'll have plenty of Lord of the Rings talk next year. But yeah, so you're going to have 4 options for Best Picture. And these 4 options are, as I anticipated at the beginning, there was going to be a lot of range of opinion, a lot of variety. And this Best Picture option kind of encapsulates that. You can go with my pick. I have Mad Max Fury Road. You can go with Adam's pick. He has Inside Out. You can go with V's pick. She has The Witch. Or you can go with the Academy, who had Spotlight. So really good options all around. We're going to quickly turn it over to a few lingering questions that we got from our wonderful loyal listeners, and then we'll wrap everything up. So first up is our resident question queen, Heather Stewart, who follows us avidly on all the social media platforms, and we appreciate her for that. She asked us to rank Mark Ruffalo's Oscar-nominated roles, those being Spotlight, Poor Things, The Kids Are All Right, and Foxcatcher. Now, I'll quickly throw mine in, and then I'll let you guys kind of ponder on it for a moment. And V, obviously, you'll have to rank it without Poor Things, which is okay. I'll say for me, this was a really easy question when Heather sent it over. I think Poor Things is his best performance of those 4. I love him in Poor Things. I think Spotlight's his second best, which I happen to give a win vote for this year. I think he's really good in The Kids Are All Right, which we did a 2010 episode. He didn't quite make my nominations. And then at the bottom, I don't think he's particularly great in Foxcatcher, which I didn't nominate in 2005, or 2011, pardon me. So yeah, that would be my ranking. Poor Things, Spotlight, Kids Are All Right, Foxcatcher. Adam?
Well, my 1 would be Foxcatcher, which is great. I love that that's where you went. 2 is Poor Things. That's a very close 2. I would probably go Spotlight and then Kids Are All Right.
Is he your favorite of the 3 actors in Foxcatcher? Channing, Carell, and him?
You guys threw a lot of shit at that movie when you did it. I was not very, very thrilled about that. I don't know. I really do like what Steve Carell is doing in that movie. So I'm going to go with I don't know. Okay. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Listen, I'll back off my Foxcatcher hate. I don't hate the movie. I'm not compelled to go back and watch it, and I would prefer to watch like Capote or some of the other work from the director. It's just I don't know. It's not in my wheelhouse, but
fair.
Agree to disagree. V, what about you? How do you rank the Ruffalo performances you've seen of those 4?
So basically the same as you, but minus Poor Faces. I can't place that. So Spotlight, If It's All Right, and then Foxcatcher, which like I saw, but I barely have met. I'm not a sports movie person, so like it's meh for me. I'm just not a weirdly enough, Creed, I loved it. I hate sports movies most of the time, but I absolutely loved it. And now when I've like go on a Rocky/Creed binge now.
Yeah, so if I'm not mistaken, when you had messaged me when you first watched Creed and were really raving about it, and I believe you had said you had not seen any of the Rocky films, like anything.
Yeah,
and
nothing.
Is that still the case?
I haven't had a chance to go back yet, but I mean, like, obviously it's so ingrained in the zeitgeist. I've seen like good portions of them at this point, and you know, I know the general like backstories. I wasn't completely in the dark about what was going on in Creed. But for some reason, Creed made me cry and Inside Out didn't. And I don't know if I don't know what's wrong with me. And then like Spotlight puts me to sleep. I don't know. Something's internally not regulated there. But yeah, I just think it was, just like, I guess we had that underdog story and sort of like having to fight to make a name for yourself it was really compelling. And I went into it just being like, ugh, boxing. And now I was like, oh, this actually was really great. And then right after I watched Southpaw and I was like, oh no, I picked the best boxing movie first and now this one just feels awful in comparison.
Yeah, Southpaw it's not one of my favorite boxing movies. That's for sure. I'll be eager to hear where your road of Rocky takes you because I don't know too many people have seen none of the Rocky franchise. So that'll be kind of cool to find later in life, you know, as opposed to like seeing it in your teens or whatever. Like I remember seeing Rocky very young. Okay, we've got one more from Heather Stewart. So she said, I think the consensus at the time was that Spotlight won thanks to the preferential ballot voting. Do we agree? And which film do we think would have won the most first place votes and would have won in 2015 if using the old voting system? So I think this is a really interesting question, and obviously now we're still using that preferential voting system, which does skew things a little bit, where maybe safer movies can win because they get more higher votes. We're like Poor Things last year. I knew an equal amount of people who thought Poor Things was the best movie of 2023 and the worst movie of 2023, and so it was just never gonna have a happy medium. So I personally think if you look back, The Revenant won the BAFTA and the Golden Globe for drama, and The Martian famously won Golden Globe for comedy, which still makes no sense. I think Spotlight still would have won, even if it was like the old voting system where the most first place votes gets it for you. I just think that because of like how prescient Spotlight was with what it was uncovering, I think it still would have gotten ahead of The Revenant. But I don't know if either of you think the voters maybe would have gone a different direction.
I don't really think so. I think Spotlight, or as you mentioned, the Revenant, I think it was a toss-up between those two. And I think it would make sense with Leo winning that year that it might have ended up going in that direction too. Yeah, like I think Spotlight was, I don't know how to describe, like it was definitely very much talked about at that time. And I can see it just easily winning.
I think given the amount of recognizable faces in Spotlight helps. It's got a big I mean, I know Big Short does too, but in terms of the movies that were kind of higher up, but Spotlight, Revenant, I think Spotlight had more of a draw in terms of both, yes, the prescientness of the story, but also look at this ensemble of people that we all know and like.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that for sure. So thanks to Heather for sending those questions, and I'm sure on the next episode, Heather's going to have a host of other wonderful stuff for us. Appreciate that. Our next question comes from Tom Hardy's Lips over on Twitter, and that's an amazing profile name, which just made me laugh. So the question is, how about Tom Hardy's 2015 run? He did Mad Max Fury Road, he did The Revenant, he did Child 44, and he did Legend. What a busy year. So I'll just say I'm not one to pass up praising Tom Hardy. I'm a big Tom Hardy guy all the way back to the early days of his career, Bronson, even stuff he did pre-Bronson over, in Britain that didn't necessarily make it over here. Yeah, it was fun going back and watching 2015 and seeing Hardy. I think Legend, we didn't talk about Legend at all, but I think he does a pretty good job playing the dual roles. Is he as good as Lindsay Lohan in The Parent Trap? Maybe not, but he's still pretty good playing dual roles. Child 44 is not a great movie, but I'm not one to pass up some Tom Hardy love. Adam, what did you think of Tom Hardy 2015 year?
Tom Hardy is one to throw on a voice whenever he can do it. I do think that if you look at what he did in 2015, it does show that he does try to push himself. He does have a good range. He does like to play different kinds of parts, and you can always expect the voice, but I do think that I think over the course of his career, he does play a myriad of characters, which I always appreciate, because you don't always want to play the same kind of thing. So I appreciate that from him.
V, what about you?
I like him, but he's not my favorite actor, and he kind of is someone that I forget about when I think of the greater actors that are still working out, but I think he was the best part of The Revenant as far as acting is concerned. I was actually kind of surprised that all the attention went to Leo during this, especially given that we now have uncovered it's mostly grunting and forceful staring. And Tom is the only one that's really playing someone extremely unlikable, who has, like, I guess, I don't know, world outlook. Like, he's a pragmatist. He's like, this guy's holding us back, time to drop him. Sorry, not sorry. And everyone else is I guess, a bit more, like, sympathetic and is like, oh no, we can't leave him. And I felt like he was the only person that was like a personality that was there. And I wanted that that's what I was expecting from Leo after hearing the win and hearing all the work he did. I was expecting him to be like the presence, but it was really more his character.
Yeah, Tom Hardy's a really easy person to believe as a villainous character when I think about him, because it feels like he's really tough. He is really tough in real life. He does jiu-jitsu tournaments at random and all sorts of crazy shit, and he had a really tough upbringing. By and large, I think just about everything Tom Hardy's been in, I have fun with, except for there was that one terrible rom-com he did with Reese Witherspoon and Chris Pine, maybe? I don't even remember. Yeah, it was like a three-way love triangle where they were spies even, maybe. It was kind of Mr. and Mrs. Smithy.
Wasn't it called This Is War?
There you go. This Means War?
This
Something
Means
like
War,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, that was about the only one where I'm like, Tom Hardy, don't go this lane. You're not this guy, you know. Stick to what you're good at. But yeah, Tom Hardy. Thank you, Tom Hardy's lips, for sending over that wonderful question. And we've got another question from Cinema Pursuit Podcast, who sent one over earlier in the episode. They said, what ended up being your personal favorite 3 to 5 movies that you'll always come back to? They did an entire episode back in March redoing the 2015 Oscars, kind of like we're doing. And their collective list was The Big Short, Steve Jobs, Fury Road as their top 3. I'll just say really quickly, if I had to pull 3 that I find myself watching the most, these aren't necessarily what I think are the best. Fury Road, number 1. I've seen it countless times. The Force Awakens, I've seen more times than I can count because I really do love that movie, even though I don't like where the trilogy went. And then Inside Out is my 3rd. Those are the 3 that I find I go back to with some regularity still. V, what about you?
Let's see, I would go The Witch, Green Room, Big Short, Brooklyn, and Ex Machina.
Nice. Adam?
I think, yeah, Inside Out, Invitation, Sicario, and I'm kind of just looking at what else I have on here. I'll stick with those are the 3 that I know I've watched more than once since they came out. So I'll stick with those ones.
Okay. Okay, next question we got is from Daniel Rumbles over on Twitter. And Daniel asked us, if there was an Oscar for action, what would have won in 2015, or what would we have chosen? So there were quite a lot of action movies in 2015. You had The Force Awakens, you had Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, you had Fury Road, you also had some Marvel fare, Age of Ultron, Ant-Man, there was a Bond film, Spectre, Mockingjay Part 2 came out that year, Jurassic World came out, so a pretty good plethora of action, blockbuster, popcorn fare. Is there really any debate? It's Fury Road, right? I mean, like, the other movies are fine action movies, but that's a different level, in my opinion.
Might go Force Awakens, just to be divergent. And I hate, it's hard to like separate it from the 2 that came after, which I actually like them more than like some people like to shit on them. But I feel like it's set up. It was like a really good launching for something that could have been really great. And it did some, there's fan service, but it wasn't too like nostalgia focused. It set up these new characters really, really well. And I think overall it was really great. I like Mad Max, but like the characters say less. There's actually less dialogue. So I like that there's more dialogue in The Force Awakens. So I'll go with that.
I'm with you, Andrew. I think it's Mad Max.
I figured that was probably going to be the case. I like all of the other action. I like most of those other movies I just listed off. They're fine action movies, but I think there's a definite separation between Fury Road, Force Awakens, and everything else. Next question is from Sarah over at Shea Cinema on Instagram, and she brought a very fun question to the party, or you can define fun how you will on this question. She asked, why in the world does 50 Shades of Grey actually exist? No, seriously, the movie is garbage.
No, I know why it exists.
Please tell us, V.
It's going to sound really weird. 9/11. So 9/11 inspired My Chemical Romance. My Chemical Romance inspired Twilight. Twilight inspired 50 Shades of Grey.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
So terrorists. Another thing that they've ruined. Cinema.
They ruin everything.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to ask V, because it's rare that we have a question about a very controversial book and we have an actual author in the room. Have you read any or all of the 50 Shades books?
No, I've read excerpts, and man,
I hear
not
they're
so
really
great.
rough.
They are very rough. I don't know. I mean, I guess I think it was a lot of just hubbub is what made it popular, but it's definitely not good writing. Twilight has better writing than Twilight's not great. It's just, she makes some very basic, like, English class mistakes, and for some reason she's a millionaire, so that's great. And there's just, I don't know, the way she's described sex, there's some just weird, I don't know why some women find some of this stuff sexy. I'm not talking about BDSM, just like some of the specific things that happen in the book are weird. Like, I just don't know why anyone is into it. So for example, there's a scene where he like wants to have sex with her, but she's on her period, so he pulls down the tampon and throws it. And apparently this turned on a bunch of people. It makes No, 9/11 inspiring my chemical romance and then Twilight, and then this it makes more sense than whatever the hell was what's happening. And as a my chem fan, I'm kind of like weirdly like how is it I love this band because I was like a bit emo in my day. And then it also like ended up inspiring like two relatively cringe novels. That's just it's unpleasant.
Okay, to Adam, to you, it's a two-pronged question. One, have you read the books? Two, have you or when will you cover them on Below Freezing?
Yeah. No, I have not read the books. I will never read the books. When are we going to cover on Below Freezing? God, I really wish you hadn't said that because at some point this will make its way back to Melissa and she will suggest it and I won't enjoy it at all. So probably early next year, I guess, is the answer to that question.
Wonderful. I'm always glad to put things out into the world that seem to find new life. By the way, you all did a Twilight run of Below Freezing episodes, which very exciting stuff. I know you were a big fan of those.
The most excited I got was whenever they mentioned the Mariners. That was about it. That was really about it.
Which is also something that you were really excited about for Longlegs, I know, too. Anytime there's a Mariners reference, you always get a little...
Listen, okay, yes, very true, but that was when the Mariners were good. Like, that was a great reference. That was when Griffey and Edgar Martinez were playing, and I was proud to be a Mariners fan.
That's true. I will definitely say I've never read the 50 Shades books. I have... unfortunately watched all of the films because I have this horrible compulsion to like complete things. So when I watch the first one, I have to see it through. I did not rewatch 50 Shades for this prep. I know that Sarah Shea, who sent this question, she sent me a question on the last episode about a movie, Road to Morocco, which I hadn't seen until she sent the question, and I painfully went and watched it. But I did not do 50 Shades for you, so sorry about that, Sarah. And our final question will be from friend of the show, future guest Adam Freed over at Movie Archer. He asked us, outside of Terminator 2, name a film that made you fear technology more than Ex Machina. Is there anything that comes to mind that scared the shit out of you in relation to technology?
It's not a movie, but almost any episode of Black Mirror.
That's a great answer.
Yeah, Black Mirror, or somewhat sarcastically, The Social Network.
That's a good point, too, yeah. I did not prep for this at all. I just wanted to kind of think about this one on the fly. Black Mirror is the right answer. That's a great... Now, I assume all three of us have seen most of, if not all of the Black Mirror episodes. Do you have one or two favorites that stick out to you that you love or are terrified of or anything?
Oh my God, to say love is tricky because they're just so fucked up. The two that like scare me the most, there's the one episode where the mother can put like the parental controls on the child's eyes. And so like, and where that one goes. And I don't actually think this one is as beloved in the franchise, but there's the one where the really kind of young, skinny English kid basically gets caught jerking off. And then he gets sent down this rabbit hole of having to complete all these tasks. Both of those things just, I mean, those two, because of where they go, just scare the shit out of me.
Good answers there. V, do you have any? If not, if you want to think about it for a minute, I can jump in.
I just don't remember what they're called because it's been a while. I haven't watched the most recent, but the one where they're like they exercise for a job, they know the points, you know, that the one of the very first one, because it is very similar to like how our life is, that we have sometimes do pointless work for money that we spend on entertainment that doesn't actually always fill us, like especially like reality TV or something that's a bit more cheap and just a stone cold bummer. And also one with Bryce Dallas Howard where she like there's the rating system that follows you around, which like we're very close to already having that. Like it's if you own any sort of business or any kind, you are already rated on some regards. Like our followings are kind of like ratings that a little differently, but it's like if you have a certain amount of followings on Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever, you have like a certain, you're treated differently sometimes even in real life, and it's freaky. And I feel like that's closer. I don't use things like Uber, but the fact that like the driver rates you and you rate the driver is like we can't have a human interaction without having to put it into some sort of quantifiable terms. Like I think it's kind of like turning us a little bit too transactional.
Yeah, there's like my brain gets so flooded when I think about Black Mirror episodes because there's so many great ones. There's a couple of duds in there, but I would say the two. If I had to pick one that's fun, that's a loose term, but like I love USS Callister. That's the one where it's like sort of the Star Trek-y one with Jesse Plemons, and you don't fully know what's going on until there's sort of a turn in that one. That one's one I can go back to and watch. They're making a sequel to it, which I'm a little nervous about because it's like why are you going to touch what's a really great Black Mirror episode? Because I don't think it's going to end well for a sequel. And the one that scares the shit out of me the most, because I think it doesn't feel too far away from where we could actually be. I think it's season 1, and it's the one where you wear contact lenses where you can rewind conversations, and I'm like, fuck, like there have been times, like we all do it with our significant others, our spouse, where you have an argument and you're like, I swear to God you said that, or I whatever, and it's like, that opens up a can of worms that you can't undo, and it's like, I don't know if I want to, I don't know, it feels like a really frightening world to live in and have a relationship, and so that episode just, yeah, that puts the fear of God into me thinking about that one, because I know I've said some shit and then I've forgotten about it. All right, well, that's going to do it for this recording, but again, this is only the beginning. Now that we have our picks made, it will ultimately be up to you, the fans, to decide what goes into the Almanac as the true winners. We're going to be putting up social media polls across all social media platforms in the coming days, and we need your votes to be cast. Again, the more places you follow, the more opportunities you have to vote. Now, before we sign off, let's talk a little bit about what's to come for the two of you in 2024. Adam, this episode is going to go up the first Friday in October. So what do you have for the fall with 1001 by 1 and Below Freezing, two of the best podcasts anyone can listen to for their time?
Well, I believe we're getting close to the release of our episodes on Ringu and The Night of the Hunter for 1001 by 1. The new thing that we're doing now with the 1001 by 1 by 3, we kind of just, I believe I can say that around this time we'll be doing our Love Lies Bleeding and 3 pulpy, sexy crime thriller recommendations episode. Below Freezing, listen, that changes day to day. I truly have no idea. We've been kicking around the idea for October of, instead of doing every other week, doing every Tuesday release of what we're going to call unnecessary remakes of horror films for the month of October. We have some, of course, terrible things in mind for that. So that, I think that's where we're going, but I'm not positive. But you can expect bad horror for the month of October for Below Freezing.
And where can people find you on all the social media platforms if they're looking for your shows?
God, where do they post podcasts these days? Probably Spotify or Apple, other big conglomerate places. But listen, if you're listening to this show, you're probably already on one of the major platforms where you're going to find us. So I would say check out, if you're listening to this episode, use that same program and just search Below Freezing or 1001 by 1.
And I promise anyone who's listening now, if you want to find Adam on the socials, I'll have all of the social media tags in the description below, so you can find everything for Adam and all of his shows over there. Again, Adam, Below Freezing, 1001 by 1, two of my absolute favorite shows. I listen to them most of the time when I'm doing workouts in the morning because they're a really nice way to distract me from the pain I'm going through. And I can speak firsthand, having been a guest on both of them and having a good time. Below Freezing is a chaotic energy in the best possible way, thanks to your wife, Melissa, who is just the best. And it's impossible to listen to Below Freezing and not have a smile on your face the whole time because of the chemistry between you. But Melissa's amazing. Sometimes you guys have your kids on for episodes. Sometimes you cover Stone Cold Steve Austin movies. You're all over the place, and the world is a better place for having your shows in there. So again, thanks for being here, Adam.
Of course, glad to do it.
And V, you are a frequent podcast guest on shows, and also you have something in the works in the world of books coming out. So why don't you tell us what's going on in the world of V.P. Morris?
Yes, so my third novel will be coming out in March of 2025, but I will have it available for pre-order on Halloween. It's called The Devil We Used to Know, and it is a paranormal thriller that has a ton of early 2000s nostalgia in it.
Excellent. And do you have any, I know you do some podcasts every now and then for some horror shows out there. Do you have anything in store on the way?
I don't have anything with a release date that I know of yet. But I also have 2 other novels, Dead Ringer and Shadowcast, that are on Amazon. So if you like dark thrillers, mysteries, please check those out.
Yes, and just like I said for Adam, we will have the links to everything that V does. We'll have all the book links to find those wonderful pieces of literature to read. And V, thank you again for being on the show for a second time. It was a pleasure to have you once again.
Of course, it was so much fun.
And look out for the upcoming 11th episode in November, where I'm joined by 3 guests in what is surely going to be a wild episode. Those individuals are Kieran B. of Best Picture Cast, who you'll recognize from the first episode of the season. I'll have Britt Reinholds Hobson, who is part of that holy trinity of podcasting with Adam over at 1001 by 1. And she was, of course, the star of the 1994 episode in July. People couldn't get enough of Britt. And last but certainly not least, for his Almanac debut, I'm having Mike from Cinemus over. I can't wait to have Mike on. Mike is a treat. If you've listened to Cinemus, you know how wonderful Mike is. We're going to be covering the year 1996, which is the year The English Patient took down Fargo, Trainspotting, Jerry Maguire, Scream, Romeo and Juliet, and so many other movies. So that should be a fun one. And again, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, Threads, TikTok, Facebook, all the goddamn socials at Rev Almanac. There's going to be timestamps on each category in case you need to go back and listen to a certain part as you think about your vote, as well as links again to Adam and V's work. And if you enjoyed Adam and V on the episode, you are in luck, my friends. They're both going to be back. They're going to be back for an episode in season 2 in 2025, separately for a couple of great episodes. I'm looking forward to having them back again. That's going to do it for this episode, and we will see you next time.